there's going to be a strong financial incentive on them to get away with as much of a memory restriction as possible.
You think they could get away with 24 gigabytes?
They're going to be leaning on all kinds of technologies to try to make that happen.
Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom. And today's lead sponsors are Make, Wondershare, Recover, and CDkeyoffer.com. Look down below for offers on those products. Today, I am joined by, I'll just admit it. You've been on, I think, 7 times now. One of my favorite guests to have on. And I think I'm getting good at this. You know, I try to time guests for when the news will be applicable to what they would want to talk about. And just the lead up to this, there's been all of this stuff coming out about new. Well, everyone's talking about the AI bubble, N1X CPUs coming soon. You just reviewed a bunch of AMD and Intel stuff, and it's really fun to see a bunch of other stuff drop, including apparently a controversial AI video you had yourself that I want to get into. But please introduce yourself.
Hey, I'm Wendell. I'm an internet rando. At Level1Techs, we make videos on fun stuff like hardware and software, and I don't know. I like Linux and Linux accessories. I don't know what to tell you.
Well, Linux is really having a moment right now. Like more and more that when you come on, more and more it's like, we got to talk about your opinions on Linux, because this is, 2025 and maybe second half of 25, first half of 26 so far has been like the 12 months, the year of people are just openly saying they hate Windows. Like it's just everyone. It doesn't matter if you use it or not. Everyone's just saying it.
Yeah, I like Linux. My favorite thing is probably the anti-cheat is the thing that's slowing stuff down the most right now, and not even that much, because Valve is really leaning on publishing companies to stop that nonsense. And
that's pretty much an arbitrary limitation entirely, right? That anti-cheat would not work on Linux.
Yeah, it's a fun. So anti-cheat doesn't really work all that well on Windows either, which is kind of an open secret. The thing to do is to get the hardware IDs of the machine. And then it's like, this machine is banned, which is what Xboxes do. And it's like, oh, this is banned of the PlayStation Network. Like, how hard is that? You can literally do that. And that's what we're doing, like secure boot and all this other kind of stuff. A lot of these game companies are moving toward, you must have secure boot. There have been some game updates like, why do I need secure boot? I don't understand. So they're already doing that. When you close that loophole, it turns out Linux doesn't work any differently than Windows. Mm-hmm. So if your anti-cheat relies on secure boot and TPM, it works identically on Linux as it does on Windows. So it's all just nonsense. It's literally just BS.
Let me ask this question first. I actually combined two, one from Valentine and one from Transpose 1195. With the rise of SteamOS and local AI, are more hardware vendors treating Linux as a first-class citizen? Are the Nvidia Linux drivers improving? Are firmware updates more commonly available through LVFS? Are things like AMD core parking and Intel hybrid topology, like in the scheduler power management stuff, is that supported on the day of a product release on Linux these days? And really, what are the top 1 or 2 issues holding back broader Linux adoption for PC gamers?
I really don't think that there are. Like, if you were to ask me what are the significant issues holding back Linux adoption 2 years ago, the answer would be way different. And like the scale of the issues is like 10% of what it was 2 years ago. So it's almost minor inconveniences and minor annoyances, and just little incongruent things and little housekeeping things, little messy things that will drive people insane switching to Linux. It's still the case that some people want an identical experience. Like they want Windows without Windows. And like, if you're in that mindset, it's a little bit disappointing. But SteamOS has done a tremendous job. And a lot of game companies have said, oh, there are 4 million, Steam Decks. Mm-hmm. We want access to that player base. We should do the minimum to be able to support that. And that is nice to see, even when we get outside anti-cheat and everything else. The software, it's been a Herculean software lift, the developers that Valve has employed on the Vulkan side and the Proton side, the wheels that they've greased with barrels and barrels of cash have paid off, and that has been really a lot of fun to see. But also, the thing that's helped this along is Microsoft like completely losing the plot on everything.
Yes.
And some of that's on like the Apple side. Like in like Q4 of 2025, what happened was somebody looked at and it's like, yeah, we're going to make a lot of money because of this forced transition from, for 8th gen and hardware, because a lot of our corporate customers where we still make a lot of money have a lot of end of life hardware, and they're going to convert to Windows 11. But their IT departments had such a horrible time with Windows 11 that a lot of those Fortune 1000 companies, they went Mac. Because if you're going to have that much friction for your migration, why don't you just go Mac? And then there's a lot of companies that are spending crazy amounts of money on the $600 Mac, which is basically a disposable computer. Like, I'm sure it'll be fine for like a year, but like in a year or 18 months from now, it's like your fleet of Macs is you're going to look down and say, oh, we need to replace this, or oh, it died, or whatever. And so it's
Do you
Linux,
think because they would break, or because they don't have enough RAM to last more than a couple of years?
Probably a little column A, a little column B. And that has also helped Linux a ton, because, Linux runs great on 8th gen. There's a ton of people on our forum that have like 7th and 8th gen HP and Lenovo. And Linux runs like a dream on those, especially if you've got a nice fast SSD. So Linux on older hardware. And now in the winter of our discontent where you can't get hardware, and it's like, yeah, I'll take a 7th or 8th gen laptop, especially if I can get a new battery for it. That'll run Linux great. Why wouldn't you do that? It's going to be awesome. Local AI is a whole other different question. And it's hard to run local AI on inexpensive hardware that's any good. But local AI, I think, is coming. It's just not, the pieces are there, but the hardware is not evenly distributed.
So to summarize, I think what you're saying for Linux is it's almost a first-class citizen now, and it's really just a dozen minor inconveniences, or maybe even just perceived minor, like maybe it's not even really that much harder to use. That's really all that's holding back Linux from taking serious market share from Windows and consumer products, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think that it's going to be a flashpoint in that some sort of, when the Rubicon is crossed, it's going to be an almost overnight, oh, I could just use this and it's fine. And it might be that doesn't happen until Microsoft stumbles catastrophically. It might be that happens when some, multimillionaire gets a bug, up his butt and says, okay, we're going to dot the I's and cross the T's. I don't know exactly what that looks like, but
like make their own Linux distribution that feels like Windows or something.
Yeah, and it's probably just lipstick. But if you look at how far Bazzite and CachyOS have come, there are philosophical aspects to how those distributions approach common Linux problems that are a little outside the box, that are a little off the beaten path for the distros that came before them. And because of these very slightly different ways of thinking, they've made a lot of inroads and a lot of progress in this demographic.
Yeah, it's interesting too. While you were talking, I wanted to just throw a poll on my YouTube channel, and it's bouncing back and forth. We have 71 votes by now. We're not even to 1,000 yet, but I just asked plainly, do you use SteamOS or Linux, or do you use Windows for your primary gaming PC? And what I'm seeing is it's to like 70, 30, 25, 75, ping pong in between. And that actually surprises me. Like I don't know. I would guess your community is more pro Linux. It's probably a higher percentage, but I'm actually kind of shocked. It seems like 30% of my viewers are using that. So it does seem like we might be at the flashpoint this year. I don't know.
Early adopters. It's just all it is. It's just early adopters.
Mm-hmm. And it's funny because it's like, well, yeah, so look, Moore's Law's Dead community is going to be much more enthusiasts than the average community, sure. But I don't know that it's necessary they'd be more likely to be an enthusiast that uses Linux. There's quite a few Xbox fans, PlayStation fans, I still technically use Windows. I don't talk about Linux a lot, actually. It's interesting. So if even my community is getting to 30%, I mean, the warning lights must be just going off at Microsoft right now.
You can only get so many. Have you heard the good word of OneDrive pop-ups before you just lose your mind and format your drive?
I know. It's the fact that like everyone has a OneDrive story, I mean, is insane. But that's why people are switching. Another Chris writes in and says, Tom and Wendell, what are your thoughts on competing Steam machines? I've seen some very compelling systems that are more powerful, and I myself made a living room PC that put straight into Steam. It is basically great enough. That said, Steam Machine definitely has the edge because, honestly, even 30 minutes of setup can be a nuisance for most people. Do you agree?
Yeah. We did a video on building a Steam machine from where we tried a couple of different starting points. And I think one of the hardware configurations was like the inexpensive Minis Forum motherboards, which have like the mobile CPU, but it's like all in one.
I'm using one
like,
right now. I love them. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, it's just, you can do so much with those. All the way through, it's like, here's a 7000 series, AM5. And all of that was over. It was like, oh, here's a discrete GPU. Here's a 7000 series GPU. So, last gen GPU. And all of that was just overkill. It's like, oh yeah, 180 FPS at 1080p. Psh, sounds good. The thing that video made me appreciate is, a Steam Deck with a good USB docking station could also make a perfectly reasonable living room machine, especially for streaming from a game machine somewhere else, because it's got hardware decode. So it doesn't even have to do anything. You can just stream 1080p from, your gaming machine at 100 FPS and power your living room TV, and ta-da, there you go. But you can also use it for media and everything else. It's just a profile on the Steam machine. So if you want a free, you already have a Steam Deck and you want a free, you just need a USB dock that has HDMI and you're good to go.
So I'm probably going to say something, or I'm going to say something that will probably make the entire Level1Techs fan base mad, but I've actually never even used SteamOS once. I apologize. Let me do my land acknowledgement now, that I should have tried it by now, but I haven't. Is it to a place, do you think, where like lipstick, there's putting lipstick on it, they could do this little bit extra and then just start marketing it directly as a competitor to Windows? Like, how close is it really to just be that?
Well, right now, Valve has been, so the whole story there is that for a while, SteamOS, it's like, yeah, you could take it and try it and do stuff with it on not a Steam Deck. And that didn't go well. And that was years ago. Mm-hmm. And so since then, it's still basically not a thing. Like, Valve doesn't encourage you to put SteamOS on things that are not a Steam Deck. Now, an interesting situation happened in that you had all these companies show up, Lenovo and Asus, that there's like, oh, we can do it. Like, the Steam Deck was shockingly successful. And there are people in boardrooms that have said, we did all the market study, the market analysis. We spent probably $1 million on trying to figure out if there was a market for a handheld. And the market kept coming back and telling us, no, 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 no. And yet, against all odds, a Zen 2 CPU, which was old by enthusiast standards at the time that the Steam Deck came out, is winning. And that was a battery move. Like, Valve was like, no, we don't. It's like, we can get it done with Zen 2 and we'll have better battery life with Zen 2, but we really need RDNA. So it's this weird, the historical context here is just insane. And SteamOS is what made the difference between the experience being, we can sell 4 million of these, and the dumpster fires, IMHO, that we have on Windows handhelds elsewhere. And so there has been a little bit of a crack in the SteamOS is just for Steam Deck mantra that we've had the last couple of years, because the dedicated Steam machines, like, well, we're not going to come out with Steam machines, but we'll do SteamOS. That wasn't good. That actually probably hurt things in the common mindset. And so now it's like, oh, we can run SteamOS on other handhelds that are not the Steam Deck, because things like, it's not really AMD's fault exactly, but like when you incorporate, like, say, the Z1 CPU into the Windows platform, you that did the integration are responsible for the driver. Like, you've got the stuff that AMD is doing, but it's up to you to pick that up with smart developers, package that for your thing, and deploy it. Like, AMD is not doing hardware drivers for all these different platforms. That's not really the case with Linux. Well, I mean, you can have enough enthusiasts on Linux doing the thing. So we might actually get to a point where I think we're already there. I think it would not be unfair for me to say that Linux has better hardware support for these platforms that have been basically abandoned from a driver level on the Windows side on Linux. And it's like, so there's some I's that are still being dotted and some T's that are being crossed. There's some madman with a knitting needle and thread that's sewing up things behind the scenes for all of that. But it looks like those pieces of hardware are going to be better supported on Linux, even though they were never designed for Linux, just because it's like, it doesn't make economic sense for us to do this. And it's not because those pieces of hardware were bad. Those pieces of hardware were amazing. The software was that bad.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I feel like all they need to do is, like, step one, actually get the Steam machine out. Step two, make it so that I think Nvidia is getting there, right, is well supported on SteamOS. And then step 3, add a basic ability to use the desktop and have a few apps integrated, and then boom, you basically have a better Windows already. Like, I think the Nvidia thing's a big part of it though too, right? Because most people own Nvidia graphics cards. Or is it not? Like, has Nvidia gotten better? Because I've constantly heard that
Nvidia has gotten a lot better.
Okay.
And part of that is the AI side of things, because the AI thing, I think, has taken off in a way that Nvidia had never, ever thought possible. And in some ways, on the AI side of things, it's funny because the Windows subsystem for Linux, meaning that you run Linux under Windows, not exactly as a VM, has more functionality than the native Windows functionality for the AI end of things for NVIDIA drivers at this point, which is insane. Like the NVIDIA SMI that's designed for WSL is not the same as NVIDIA SMI that runs on bare metal. But there are certain things that, like hardware manipulation registers running containerized Docker workloads, that used to be able to do on native Windows, and NVIDIA has basically jettisoned all that because no one really does it. And they don't really treat Windows like a first-class citizen anymore with those developer workloads, which makes sense because most of the people were doing it on Linux. And so things have improved on the Linux side of things. They have a more open driver that does a binary blob. That's kind of like how AMD did their approach, where they put their special sauce in a blob, but then they open up the drivers in the interface for everything else. And that's worked out really well for AMD. At the same time, AMD has really upped their game on the driver and support side of things. And so performance, Vulkan, everything else has been tremendously good, to the point that a lot of the time Vulkan stuff for AI is better performing than for when we're talking about RDNA than other alternatives, which is interesting and also amazing.
So when it comes to like the Windows of it all, I think that something people might be sleeping on is how much there might be a push to reintroduce Windows, like try to fix the image of the perception of Windows, and that how that's going to be tied actually to like Xbox Helix next year. Because when they announced some of this Xbox Helix stuff, I don't know what it was, like a couple months ago, and they were showing off GDKs, and I was skeptical at first, but when I talked to some game devs, they were like, no, actually the packages they're putting together for writing games for Helix and then doing that extra tiny bit of step to get it to work generally on Windows, and then another extra step for the handheld, extra step for a Series X, that it could work. Like, they actually have made a very easy to use package here. And part of Helix will be trying to have a version of Windows that is a bit more open than what they've done on consoles before, but also hopefully runs far more efficiently than current open Windows does. And so I don't know even really what my question is, but like, do you think that Microsoft is waking up at all? And do you think because I see the way they talk about Windows issues, the way they talk about Xbox and Xbox being more efficient, and when it kind of seems like this is one big initiative that they're going to push next year.
Don't forget Windows on ARM. That was also a lot of humble pie there. So if anybody, like, Microsoft is not dumb. If there's anybody that has a brain and they're looking at this from the 50,000 foot view, they're looking at the Windows Store, and it's like, okay, the Windows Store was this amazingly squandered opportunity of just abjectly bad design that was conceived of obviously by a marketing person and somebody with an MBA and not an engineer, not somebody who actually has to work on things. And I've heard similar stories from the developers. It's like, oh, finally, there's a developer that kind of understands what we need to do and what we need to do to thread the needle on this. But the reason that they have to do this is because it will be a matter of survival. Windows will not survive if you have to do a platform shift to ARM, because the ARM experience is better. Because the software experience directly from Microsoft on ARM has been catastrophically bad. And I get the impression that inside Microsoft, the zeitgeist was, man, x86 is really holding us back. Apple with Apple Silicon and its ARM, and it's like, we should do this. And so then you had remember the Microsoft Surface X, the first ARM foray? Yeah. It's like, oh no, it's not us that are wrong. It is the hardware manufacturers. They cheaped out. And then you have Qualcomm that comes along, and it's like, oh, the Qualcomm experience was definitely objectively better, but also still trash from a software developer standpoint. And Qualcomm was just not in a position to deliver the software dev experience at scale, especially on the gaming side, especially with the GPU. But just, it's like, Microsoft, give us a sane way to handle multi-platform binaries. And there was somebody that had some engineering, like there was some stuff that was done behind the scenes to kind of deal with that. But again, torturous interference from the Marketroids, I think sabotaged all that from within, because I don't know why. And so all of this is objectively a better experience on a different, like on Linux, basically. The other thing that I don't know if it's true, but I've heard, and I would believe, and this ties in a little bit when we want to talk about it, the NX1, N1X, the Nvidia thing, is that Windows on Spark was a better experience by orders of magnitude than the Qualcomm dev kit, than anything that Qualcomm had. And we just put desktop Linux on our Spark. Like one of the first videos that we did was like, here is Cyberpunk running at 200 FPS with DLSS 4, with all of this Windows only special sauce. We're doing x86 translation in real time for ARM. And this is providing a better x86 to ARM experience than anything on any other Windows ARM platform. And this is on, with Linux, obviously. And, NVIDIA hasn't officially released an ARM Windows NVIDIA driver. They exist, but they've been very, very, very careful to not let those escape into the wild. And that Spark platform, I'm cheating a little bit, but it's only a 200 watt platform, and it's 100 watts for the CPU and 100 watts for the GPU and everything else. So it's not even really a 200 watt platform. It's really, NVIDIA says it's a 100 watt platform. And that was an incredible experience for like desktop Linux. It was not a $4,000 desktop Linux experience, but it was an incredible desktop Linux experience that if the Qualcomm people experienced, they would feel deep shame probably.
Yeah. So that's interesting, because I really don't have a direct connection to that. Like I don't have DGX Spark. I don't use Linux. I haven't messed with Qualcomm. I've talked to people that say it was a disaster, of course. But like you're saying it did work well though under Linux. And you said you benchmarked it or tested it. Did you directly compare it to the performance of Strix Halo or Panther Lake or any other, what will be their main competitors?
Yeah, Strix Halo has similar, slightly worse memory bandwidth. And the GPU side of it was a fair bit weaker.
Like 20-30% or not half, right?
No, it was not half, but it was a fair reduction in performance. But the thing that blew my mind is like, this is an x86 native versus x86 emulated on an ARM platform with 20 cores, like 10 good cores and 10 okay cores. It's like, this is a level of absurdity that is insane. And yet, here we are. There's a lot of x86 CPUs, the Strix Halo cores fundamentally have a lot more core features. So, it's not an apples to apples comparison. But that as a platform with a reasonable gaming experience was surprisingly good, especially at around 1080p and some games at 1440p. Strix Halo has also been really good in terms of like that design and everything else. And I think if they could squeeze out another 15 or 20% memory bandwidth on Strix Halo, like if the supply chain were normal and we were getting a Strix Halo refresh with like 9600 mega transfer, that would be something. But
yeah, it's interesting because I don't know if you saw, I did some reporting on N1X a few days ago. I mean, actually, me and you looked at pictures of it a year ago in a laptop, and that was a year ago, though. And the reason I had pictures, and it's not out yet in laptops, is I keep being told they keep having so many bugs to deal with in Windows. A lot of them are linked to hardware bugs, apparently, that they keep trying to squash, and they do not want to launch NVIDIA laptops with N1X until it's perfect. They know they cannot pull a Qualcomm. That would be such a disaster if they did the exact same thing Qualcomm did. They saw how that turned out. Qualcomm's done. I mean,
if sleep and wake doesn't work, then it's just not. Ironically, sleep and wake was one of the few things that worked perfectly correctly on no, not well. Maybe I would say relatively perfectly correctly on Qualcomm laptops, but yeah, I mean, it's just like looking at DGX Spark in a low power mode, as a laptop chip, it would be incredible. It would be absolutely incredible. And I think I joked in the video that we did. It's like, this looks a lot. If we just package this and stuff this in a laptop, here's Windows on ARM. Like this is what this will look like. So I think when Vera Rubin based Sparks are in full production, I think all the leftover, that's probably where the silicon will go.
So you seem optimistic though, because again, I know what it's supposed to be. And then I know the people working on the software that say it still needs work. But like if this launches in supposedly October, it sounds like you're optimistic these laptops may actually perform well.
I think for Linux, yeah, Windows is all bets are off. But Linux,
right? Because I just don't know if it's going to work in Windows. I just don't know what to expect. Because I've seen things in the past where like RDNA 1, all the rumors before it came out were that it wasn't going to work at all. And it ended up being fine. And then there's all this hype for Meteor Lake, and then there's an IPC regression. So I just don't know. I know what N1X is supposed to do. I know that it has the same amount of CUDA cores as a desktop 5070, but the problem is everyone complains about software before a product launches because it's always buggy before it launches. And you never know if it's truly an issue or this engineer you're talking to just had a bad Thursday or something, I
don't know. I don't know. The buggiest aspect, I think, of the Strix Halo has been wireless networking, and some of the stuff around that. And of course, in that platform, it's like you don't really have to be super power frugal. You don't really have to get a lot of the same stuff right that you do in a laptop. At the same time, if you look at the level of engineering that is going into the Panther Lake laptops from Intel, it's like where you're getting power savings from everything outside the cores at this point. It's like if you look away from the laptop, it's going to auto dim the screen, and then by the time you look up, in 20 milliseconds, it will restore the screen to full brightness or whatever. And how it manages idle states and how it manages like just the status LEDs across the machine.
These are all wild cards. We don't know how well N1X will do that.
Yeah. And it's like, are they just going to drop that into an existing hardware platform that already has all that power saving engineering, or are they going to have to figure out all that on this new platform for themselves? Like,
or maybe that's part of the delays, like just realizing late in the game or late in development, like, oh yeah, there's all this other stuff that like Intel and AMD have been doing to make their laptops perform better. There's nothing to do with the APU itself that maybe we're behind on.
Yeah. I think the power move from Nvidia, I think would, especially if they'd known that they were going to have this much lull in laptops, the power move from Nvidia would have definitely been to go to MSI or Asus and say, let's do an ARM-based handheld that runs Linux.
Mm-hmm. And then that could be your like Steam Deck beta product. Yeah. Valentine writes in and says, Tom has now confirmed N1X should be releasing soon, like totally pinky swearing for real this time. So despite the many software issues, though, NVIDIA is trying to make ARM on Windows happen where Qualcomm couldn't. But with the recent improvements to x86 power efficiency, is there really any point to Windows on ARM, or is everyone just trying to replicate Apple's success with Apple Silicon? Well, I would say they have to use ARM because they can't use x86, but I mean, that's why they're using it.
Yeah, if it's going to be NVIDIA native, then yeah, they definitely. It's the perennial question, right? It's like, will x86 be able to find the same power efficiency as Apple Silicon? But this drives me insane because I don't think it has ever been about that. I think that it is about the tight coupling of the hardware and software engineering that is necessary to do those kinds of enablement. Because like just on Linux, like I have the HP G1A laptop, which is a Strix Halo laptop, and HP's been really good about doing a ton of EFI updates. It's got a MediaTek Wi-Fi. The MediaTek Wi-Fi drives me insane because it is not a mediocre Wi-Fi chipset. It is actually very good Wi-Fi 7. The problem is there is exactly zero quality control on software updates it drives me insane because like I have a very specific kernel and firmware version on my HP G1A where everything works, all the channel width, everything is amazing. And then if I update any little thing or like I have like the wrong BIOS setting for like the ISP camera, then the Wi-Fi just goes insane and doesn't work correctly. And it's like, oh, it'll work with 20 megahertz channel width access points, but not 40 megahertz channel width access. And it's just, how does this bug even happen? This is an insane bug. And it just ping pongs between the insanity of like, oh, it works, oh, it doesn't, oh, it works, oh, it doesn't. And this kind of software engineering suggests that there is an architectural flaw where someone needs to come in and just do a clean slate. Let's start over. And in order to do that, Microsoft is going to have to be all in on that. And the hardware engineering team is going to have to be all in on that. And probably NVIDIA's team is saying, we got to do this. And Qualcomm was probably saying, we expect you, Microsoft, to do this, but like EFI and all the stuff that goes with that probably wasn't like it by observation. It definitely did not actually happen in reality. Yeah. And so maybe the bugginess and that kind of thing from the engineers, like those kinds of things, you don't necessarily have to reinvent the wheel, but there is a ton of opportunity to just clean slate, reset all of that, and a lot of systemic problems will go away. A lot of architectural problems that stem from poor choices made in architecture 7 years ago go away when you can just sort of clean slate reset without actually losing the institutional knowledge that went into how we got here.
Yeah, this is kind of maybe an odd comparison, but one that I like to make a lot, to like how just doing something new kind of solves a bunch of other problems without you even intending that. Like Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition, I found was the least buggy Metro game I've ever played in my life. Just zero problems. It works great. It requires ray tracing. I remember asking a game dev about that, and he's like, well, they had to rewrite all the code, so all of their old crap code probably just wasn't making the game freeze anymore. And like there might be like a sea change with next gen consoles and gaming, just because they're finally going to write games for modern architectures. And by modern, I mean Turing and later. Like we're finally forced to do it. The games might just be significantly less buggy once you have to not support all of this old stuff that just probably is, because you're going to put most of your effort into the newer, coolest stuff, and then all these old things are going to be there with all this legacy code. And I'm excited to see that keep happening, because I think a lot of the newer games actually are not that buggy compared to the complete nightmare I feel like we had from like 2015 or to 2020 or something.
I remember a friend that worked at Microsoft, and he said that, you know, his team didn't really have anything to do with the Qualcomm launch, but his team was brought in for the Qualcomm launch, and it was like, oh, we're going to have to go, you know, heads down on this. Everybody's going to have to grind. And he was like, we were basically sleeping under our desks because everything was just broken.
Yeah. This piece of content is brought to you by Make. Make is the leading visual platform for anyone to design, build, and automate, well, really anything with AI. From simple tasks and workflows to apps and entire business processes. And the best part is, well, you see everything happening in real time right on the canvas. They call it the Make Grid, actually, and it lets you watch every single decision your AI makes. So there's no black box here where you're wondering what it's doing. There's no mystery. If something looks off, you can catch it instantly and tweak it. And signing up for Make is also super easy, and actually the base version is totally free, although Moore's Law is dead fans can get 1 month of the pro version for free, which includes 10,000 operations through the link in the description. And signing up there for free does help the channel, by the way, quite a bit, but it doesn't just help the channel, it gets you 3,000 plus app integrations and real productivity gains. And I do mean productivity gains. Like, let me give you a real world example here. So we know it can be a nightmare to try to get a brand new graphics card that just launched, like a hot new GPU like RDNA 5's AT2 that should come out by late next year. And yeah, scalpers will probably try to devour the entire launch supply in literal milliseconds. You could be sitting there refreshing 6 tabs, a Discord ping goes off, and well, you'll probably still walk away with nothing. It's a losing game. But you can fix this with Make. You can have it connect to a few retailer feeds, Newegg, Amazon, Micro Center, and then feed that data straight into a Make AI agent. This agent doesn't just spam you with every listing known to man. It reads the price, checks if the thing actually is in stock, and makes a decision. If it's an AT2 product at or near the expected $550 MSRP that I leaked, well, instant telegram alert comes out. If it's some scalper trying to charge $4,000 though, the agent ignores it completely, and you ignore the garbage. And the beautiful thing, well, you can watch this all happen on the Make canvas and see exactly why the agent flagged one card and trashed another. Again, total control, no Guessing. That same logic works for any hardware you're hunting, whether it's CPUs, GPUs, whatever, and Make connects with tons of apps for tons of different uses as well, like Google Calendar, Slack, OpenAI, Discord, Facebook pages, Shopify, and honestly, too many more for me to keep going on with it. So one more time, remember that you can support Moore's Law is Dead by clicking the link in the description. It's right at the very top, one of the first lines above the fold, and it's also in a pinned comment, so go down there, and if you sign up, you can get 1 month of Pro for your business for free. That comes with 10,000 operations. There's no downside to helping this channel and helping yourself for at least a month. It's free, so please support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out Make today. All right, let me shift gears to this question here from Foos Your Dues. Have a bonny day to you loons. He says, it was more Australian. I meant to be British. Oh, well. With Strix Halo paving the way for high-performance gaming APUs on laptops and Nvidia about to enter the ring, do you think APUs will start to have an impact on desktop gaming PCs? Can we imagine a future with easier optimizations across platforms, but less modular upgrades, freedom? Yeah. Is everything a console or a PC? Was Sarah Bond ahead of the curve? Yeah, because Strix Halo could do it, but it's very expensive.
Yeah, well, it is and it isn't. It is if it's a volume part,
right?
Then, and you don't necessarily have to couple it with 128 gigs of memory. It's not it's not necessarily expensive at all. I think that actually, right now we have like the 9600X 6 cores, and I've done some videos on this too. I think that where we are with like enthusiasts and DIY machines is that like the low end basically goes away. The low end becomes what Minisform is already doing. If you get a mobile part and you slap it on an inexpensive motherboard, that is an objectively better experience at a better price point than you get with DIY. Why do you want to DIY? Well, future upgradability, like there's some good arguments there. Better memory performance, like better features, more USB ports, like there's some good arguments there. But I don't know that there's, like $500, $600, $700 difference in an argument there when you can get a motherboard built around an inexpensive platform that was intended for mobile really inexpensively. I'm really anxious to see what sort of mini motherboard type things we get based around like the new Panther Lake Core Ultra 3 or the Core 3, whatever it is. Because the N150 and the N350, those are really long in the tooth in 2026. And you could do a lot with those. I was surprised how much you could do with a little 4 or 8 E-core platform. And if you can get one of those for roughly that same money, that is a lot of compute, relatively speaking, for not a lot of money, especially in 2026 when we find ourselves not being able to get basic parts. And so then the 6 core and the 8 core desktop parts probably go away, and you have 12, 16, 20, 24 core, like people that would normally be about those enthusiast parts are going to have to get higher end stuff, and you get something that looks entirely different at a lower end. It's the business case for that being the structure of things makes a lot of sense.
Yeah, I'd say the best reason to go with do it yourself right now if you're building a desktop is literally just if you're like next to a Micro Center and they're giving you the 32 gigabytes of RAM for free with the motherboard. That's it. That is the only reason to really do it. And then like you're saying, if you go cheaper, like I'll have a link in the description in the sponsors area for people to see what we're talking about. But I just looked it up. Like it's a motherboard I've looked at from Minisform before. It's one that has an 8945HX. So that's it's really just the same as a Zen 4 mobile that I don't even know if it even boosts higher, but it's the 8000 series. And this is a 16 core, it has PCIe 5.0, and the motherboard's $420. It has the heatsink included, Wi-Fi included. And you go, this is a like $400 CPU for a $420 with the motherboard and the heatsink and the Wi-Fi. And so there's really no need to go with a 6 core if you're actually trying to save money, because the 6 core itself is half the cost of this whole platform. And that's a question that wasn't asked for this episode, but I'll bring it up now because it's constantly asked on podcasts here from fans. But like, do you think there will be a return of the Ryzen 3 and or do you think Ryzen 5 instead will just get less and less prevalent? And I think it's the latter, because why would you get a new 6 core if you can get an old 16 core for the same price? I don't understand.
Yeah, and I love it's like, okay, it's like there's no upgrade path. It's like, no, we're going to get you to drink the Kool-Aid of the home server, and that whole platform is going to move into your home server, and then you're going to have a really ball and 16 core home server that's just doing all these background tasks. We're going to add an M.2 to SATA adapter, and then you're going to rock like 5 to 8 hard drives off that little ITX motherboard. It's going to be great. You're going to love it.
Yeah, I mean, like when you cut the cost in half, I'll just like people ask like, when am I going to upgrade? And it's like, I don't know. Let me know when Minis Forum makes a Zen 7 mobile motherboard. Like that's when, because it's so cheap, I can't justify worrying about it really anymore. Especially, I mean, come on. I mean, I have a Zen 4. It's mobile, but it's 100 watts. It has Vcache on it and 16 cores. It's not slow. It's not like I'm really wanting over here. All right, let me then pivot to some CPU questions since that's what we're on. Actually, perfect. We'll go with this because I know you just reviewed this. Florida Man writes in and says, from what few reviews are present for the 9950 X3D2, most seem to be negative, but the product is selling well on Amazon. And to me, it seems like the product is an olive branch for prosumers use the same software AMD advertised as benefiting from EPYC X3D, such as CFD applications. What really are your thoughts on this product, Wendell?
I think I was the only video review. So I started at the beginning that was like, this is like, no, you're not going to want to buy this unless you are a specific user. And then AMD didn't make enough of these and they're all going to sell out. So, and I was right. Well, I mean, because AMD has told us dual Vcache doesn't make sense for a lot of workloads. And it's like, here is the empirical proof. Dual Vcache doesn't make sense for a lot of workloads. But for some of the workloads, it definitely does make sense. And I think now probably was a good time to launch it because it is a little bit winter of our discontent in terms of I would like a 24-core Threadripper CPU. I'm a little disappointed in a 24-core Threadripper CPU because even on the 4-memory channel platform, the 24-core Threadripper CPU is just a little too slow to keep up with the gamer DDR5 memory. Like you need a lot of cores for fast DDR5 memory, and the 9000 series CPUs, even though it has last gen's IO die, like whatever it is, those motherboards can actually deal with like 7200 memory and beyond mostly. And so it's delightful when you can get 8 channels of like 7200 working correctly on like a 64-core Threadripper, but then you're like $10,000 in, and it's like I just want 16 cores of absurdity, and you can get that with dual 3D Vcache because the Vcache actually takes a little bit of pressure off of main memory. So like if you do have DDR5 6000, it doesn't really matter as much between like 5200, 5600, and 6000 because more of the stuff from memory can be cached in 3D Vcache. And so there's less pressure on the somewhat weak sauce memory interface with Zen 5 because they didn't upgrade the memory interface from Zen 4 to Zen 5. And that was probably a cost saving measure. But for crazy enthusiast randos, we would say, oh, it should be faster. Why is it not faster? I want it to be faster. And dual 3D Vcache takes a lot of the complexity of managing threads and that sort of stuff. It's not that everybody wants to run computational fluid dynamics. It's just that when you do that, it's fine. I would also point out, and this is crazy, because I kind of like the Borderlands games. I haven't finished playing Borderlands 4, but Borderlands has turned into Borderlands is one of those weird games. It's like Cyberpunk was when it first came out. And I can tune Borderlands 4. I can do thread group stuff, which is insane, and like Affinity Mask stuff, which is insane, with which I figure out which threads need information locality. And so I take Borderlands 4 and I pry it apart and stuff it onto the 2 Vcache cores, and I can get better performance out of Borderlands 4 than I can in any other way. Which is kind of insane that there is at least one game that can be shown to benefit from dual Vcache.
So that's interesting. I didn't say much about the 9950 X3D2 because I was very much like, I mean, it's the best. It's really good at a few things. It doesn't seem to help gaming. But I was a bit disappointed. I thought, I wouldn't say I didn't think this for sure, but I really thought there was a chance like 3 games would get a massive boost by having Vcache on both CCDs. So you're saying if you manually tweak it, you can get that in Borderlands.
Only from Borderlands. I went down, I didn't include it in the review because it was not great, but I went down a rabbit hole with Factorio. And like the Factorio benchmarks for Vcache is also a little contrived because it's just it's the benchmark is not actually useful in real world gameplay. It doesn't tell you what you think it's telling you, but the Vcache does actually benefit Factorio for hugely complicated maps and that sort of stuff. But there's not enough threads, and the cross CCD communication is not dramatically faster than a round trip all the way back to memory.
Right.
And if it were, then okay, yeah, maybe. But if you have multiple different independent processes running, and some of them are on one CCD and some of them are on the other CCD, then you can have a really good experience. Oh, and the very first question you asked me about, oh, what's the plumbing like, for games and like cross CCD and whatever. Linux has always been far superior to Windows to be able to handle that. Linux even has user land hinting. So like how, what that means is like user processes can tell the kernel, I'm this kind of special child, help me. And the kernel can do that. And it genuinely works really well. And so even Linux struggles a little bit with like Intel's P-Core and E-Core. Like Linux would benefit from some additional work from Intel with Threadripper or whatever to deal with that. It's not terrible, but there's definitely room for improvement. And having dual 3D Vcache on Linux in those scheduling contexts and in these game contexts also does help. But most games don't have enough threads to overrun one CCD. Borderlands seems to be the exception in that it has some background threads that do something.
You see, this is why I think people might be, and maybe they're not. I mean, there actually seems to be quite a bit of hype behind it, but I think people might be sleeping on Zen 6 for two reasons. Number one, you get unified 12-core CCDs. So just right off the bat, if any game needs more than 8 cores, it probably doesn't need more than 12. That's going to be a pretty big boost. But number two, for the scenarios where you do get a boost from dual Vcache, but it still could be better because there's still all that latency communicating between the CCDs. There's going to be bridge dies that are used with Zen 6 to massively lower that latency between CCDs. And so, I mean, I don't know. We'll have to see. But like, I think with Zen 6, we could see some like radically better performance in the scenarios you're talking about when they actually just have like a fundamentally, like you've said, better memory controller and then bridge dies between them. And like what we're seeing with the 9950X3D2 is like a very, very, very small amuse-bouche for what we're going to see in some of these applications that boosted from it with Zen 6.
Yeah, it's entirely possible. I was kind of surprised that we had not seen, and this must be like, this is probably, I bet they do probably have a beta or a test product that actually tests this, but there's this idea of dual GMI links. Mm-hmm. The dies support it, and the EPYC F series CPUs have it. A lot of them, most of them, I think all of them, maybe all of them. And what that is like it's the same 8-core chiplet, but it's got 2 links to the IO die instead of 1. And those F series EPYC CPUs do not have any memory bandwidth problems whatsoever. They are amazing. And so I was kind of hoping like the 9850X3D, still 8 cores, right, would be like dual GMI links to the IO die somehow. That's not the case. But I wonder, like, would it have been just absolute bananas insanity? Because running a virtual machine on an EPYC F series CPU that is 1 chiplet without 3D Vcache is quite a bit better than the 8-core equivalent on desktop. So just because memory bandwidth, and even taking into account EPYC has considerably worse memory latency than desktop because RDIMM, and it was still better. So it's like, what? How is this? What is this madness? I don't know. So yeah, Zen 6, I mean, sure, that would be a lot of fun.
Yeah, Zen 5, it's really an all over the place generation where you have all of these things in some products, all of these things in other products, and they don't all get the benefits of clearly the technology that they have available, just because they might use, a lot of them are just using a lot of legacy stuff where other ones aren't. It's very odd, but this kind of gets me into, I want to transition into this, just picking your brain on this. So Valentine writes in against this. I'd love to hear Wendell's perspective on how many cores do people really need on desktop? Are 8 cores plenty for the foreseeable future, or are there any novel use cases that having more, and by that I mean more than 16 even, would enable, not just for gaming, but for all applications of consumer desktop CPUs? And this comes up because this is a question that we've been talking about a lot in the Moore's Law is Dead community, because a while ago I leaked this thing called Steamboat. It's like 3D stacking. Well, so there's a cache core on the bottom with 7 megabyte slices per core, and then they put a layer of cores on top of that. And then that interface is actually, it seems, with the same bridge die Zen 6 uses to an IO die. And in that way, it's 3D stacking. You save so much space and you can fit a ton of cores that actually are kind of like C cores, but they're not, because they actually have more cache than classic cores because of the space saving. And Zen 7, I guess the plan now is 36 core CCDs. And from what I can see, they could fit on desktop. Now, my personal opinion is you don't probably need a 72 core product on AM5. I'd call me crazy, but and that'd be like $3,000, I would guess, at least, But I wonder if you think that product does make sense. And there's worries about bandwidth, but it's like, yeah, but they would get 7 megabytes of cache per core instead of 4. And we might be above DDR5 10,000 by then. So I'm not sure how bandwidth starved they would be and some applications don't need all of the bandwidth, right? So, but I wonder what you think about this sort of product. Like, is this something AMD should do, like Threadripper on AM5, or do you think this product is just too niche?
So what I would love, and this is going to take some operating system cooperation, like, do we have an organization or consortium that is working together at the operating system level and the system architecture level to like come together and make things awesome? On laptops, I think that these kinds of core counts are going to be problematic for power and heat reasons. But on desktop, if you have this many cores, an interesting thing can happen in terms of architecture, and is really good in terms of security. And that is different execution contexts of the threads that you're running get their own cores, and they don't move. They don't ever change. And so like you have all these registers, and it takes a non-trivial amount of time to unload the registers, put them off onto the stack, and then reload them. And there's a lot of machinery in the CPU to hide that and make it to where that you only have to unload the things you're actually going to use for your context switch. So when a core is running a thing and then it stops and then it switches to another thing and it runs a thing and then it stops and then it runs a thing and then it stops, there's a lot of hardware in the CPU to hide the insanity of unloading stuff from the CPU core registers and then loading it back in and all this kind of stuff. And all that just goes away when you have a ton of cores and your scheduler can just basically say operating system threads get these cores. This user application gets these cores. This user application gets these cores. And if you're power gated, they don't necessarily have to be executing at the same time. Mm-hmm. But if you are not executing at the same time, you also save not having to load and unload. Like the registers just continue to exist there. And there's a lot of primitives and things on the CPU that lessen the impact of those kinds of things. But I think that from a security, like that's also where like security has failed, like Spectre and Meltdown, speculative execution, and then your user process can read a register that wasn't cleared, and then suddenly we've got a password because the other process speculated we would need the password. We didn't actually need the password. No security violation occurred. Then you look at the register and it's like, there's a password. And so like those problems just go away completely when the password never actually enters a register that you can run processes on.
So, but for the scenario, would this be like a different mode once you have this many cores? They write Windows or Linux to like operate in this different way? Or would it have to be like, we can't really do this until the minimum is 16 cores? Like even the $100 notebook has 16 cores. And so we start writing operating systems in this way.
Yeah, I think it ends up being operating system designers and software people that are really a lot closer to the metal, that have a much better understanding of it than I do, would have to get together with the people that are designing the cores to make those kinds of decisions and bring it together. But certainly I could imagine that there is a benefit from doing that. The hyperscalers, a lot of the folks that are already running 64 core and above CPUs, they already do this. They reserve 2 cores, 4 threads, or 4 cores and 8 threads, and nothing is allowed to run on those by policy except for the provider's threads and processes, the hypervisor, monitoring threads, and nothing else is allowed to execute on those cores. And that makes certain classes of security problems on a host that has multiple customers running on it go away entirely. It also makes it a lot easier to monitor if one customer is doing something bad that it might impact another customer. You can be a little bit more assured that what you're seeing is not an hallucination or an architectural thing. I don't know if that's what they're heading into in terms of more cores, more better, but it's it's always really not. There's a lot of things that don't parallelize really well, and so you're always going to need some absurdly fast cores.
Sure.
But background processes in your operating system, if those cores were only half as fast, it's fine. It doesn't really matter.
And so that's kind of what's getting interesting too. Like if I, at least in laptops and NPUs, if I pull up like what I've seen for like Zen 6 APUs, and then Zen 7, it gets even more absurd. It's getting to this thing where like apparently the upcoming APUs will have IO dies where they just have like 12 cores or 10 cores, or I guess one of the Halo ones, maybe 14 or 20 cores for Zen 7, just built into the IO die. And like, so they have like a 3 nanometer IO die, like 20 cores on there. And then you can add more cores with chiplets if you want to. That is getting into kind of a wacky world where like even budget stuff has like 20 threads. Like I think we are going to be in quite an interesting world when the default without adding chiplets, like the thing AMD would ship you to boot up your motherboard if you don't have a CPU to update it for the new, like the IO die without anything added, that alone has like 4 cores or something.
Everything gets a core. I think that'd be a lot of fun. On the laptop design side of things, the way that Intel has their 2 ultra low power cores. Yeah. But those are handy for all the background tasks for like sleep and wake. It's like those cores will run from now until the end of time on basically no power, but they are so slow that you almost don't want to use them for anything else. And so like the scheduler there is, please, for the love of God, don't use these cores unless
that's the mistake they made, right? Because like Zen 6 is going to put big cores or the full cores on there. And it's like, I feel like Intel should put like the P cores should have been on the IO die actually. So you actually want to use them, right? I mean,
but then power becomes a problem. So it's just like, but I get why Intel did that. It's like, oh, we can have these absurd, like you close the laptop and the battery's not dead in 3 hours.
But I want to ask again, just directly, would you buy a 72 core for AM5, or there's just no way you're going to Threadripper, like, and you can't see yourself needing more than like 32 cores or something?
I don't think I would buy it unless they have assuaged my concerns about the lack, like feeding the cores. Like, what am I going to, like, does the rest of the platform feed the cores? Because right now it's, I'm a little disappointed by the lower end of Threadripper in terms of keeping the platform fed. It's like I need 32 cores minimum, and really like 48 cores is better to keep everything fed. And so I would be concerned if I have a 36 core AM5 part, even with the DDR5, say like 10600. Is that really going to keep everything fed? I think I would rather have 16 absurdly fast cores instead of 32 mediocre
or 72.
Yeah.
Okay, fast cores. Carbon Cry writes in, given the core counts on modern consumer CPUs, high-end desktop has already been rolled into the standard consumer platform, you could argue. What does a consumer platform chipset need to also take place of a low to mid-range workstation? I would say PCIe lanes and ECC support, but maybe Mr. DIMM, if it is possible, or MRDIMM. Anything else? More importantly, should Intel, AMD, or both do this? Does it make sense for them from a business perspective? And by the way, that's the thing people keep saying when I talk about like Zen 6 goes to 24, or Zen 7 goes to 32, or who knows, 72 cores. Like everyone says, but do I get more PCIe lanes?
I don't know that you need more PCIe lanes. So what happened, most people don't understand what actually happened. Okay. And what actually happened was the companies that were making PCIe switching chipsets, there weren't many. There was some consolidation. There was PLX. PLX was acquired and then acquired again. And it is still a problem. There is not enough peripheral bandwidth. If you look at what Nvidia has done with like the Mellx ConnectX 8, ConnectX 9, the modern like B200 architecture, the network card is married now to the PCIe fabric. And Nvidia already has PCIe Gen 6. They've been shipping PCIe Gen 6 for about a year. We showed PCIe Gen 6 at Computex. And I think we were the first people to report it. Like, wait a minute, this is a PCIe Gen 6 backplane. And they were like, shh. But it was on the show floor at Computex. And it's you have the ConnectX NICs, and the GPUs plug into the NIC, basically. And then you've got this carrier board that has 8 PCIe slots, and the connection from that carrier board back to the CPUs is PCIe Gen 5. But the connection between the GPUs, like one GPU talking to another GPU, is twice the bandwidth, PCIe Gen 6. That is having a secondary knock-on effect in that because we don't have separate chipsets for that now. The shortage that was created by all of that going into, originally it was, Intel was kind of anemic. Even their server CPUs just didn't have enough PCIe lanes. And then, AMD comes stomping in the room. They're like, oh, here's 128 lanes. And, here's your, highest end Intel Xeon with like 24 lanes. And Intel's like, what now? 128? What? And it's hard to put more than 128 lanes or, 100 and I think it's 136 now at this point. And there's some like utility lanes that are slower, but it's hard to put more lanes on your CPU. So PCIe Gen 6 on the CPU, okay, it's going to be double the bandwidth. What we need is a chipset that sits between the CPU and the low speed peripherals, where low speed peripherals is less than PCIe Gen 6. So if we had a chipset that took 16 lanes on one side of PCIe Gen 6 and gave you 32 lanes of PCIe Gen 5, all your desktop problems suddenly go away. And that chip should not be wildly expensive. It has historically up till now been wildly expensive since the PLX days because of the demand on the server context. But now the server context demand is being alleviated because NVIDIA is just doing their own chips. And you got entries, you got like Phison is doing some chipsets now. Texas Instruments is doing, Texas Instruments is a little different story, but remember the old enthusiast motherboards that had like 4 X16 slots for like Crossfire, and there's a chip on there. It's like, this is a true, each one of these is 16 lanes. And they did their own mux back to the CPU. Those will be the days once again, maybe, for some of those. Even on like server, like there are like server AM5 is really good. Server AM5 is better than ever because real server CPUs are unaffordable. And this kind of ties in with one of your other questions about Zen 3. It's like, is Zen 3 still viable? Oh yeah, absolutely. And the platform, the AM5 platform being even more viable than ever, the thing holding it back there is the lack of PCIe lanes. And it's because there's not a good like AM5 ready chipset. Like if you could take the 16, it was really 24 lanes on that AM5 EPYC CPU. And if you could take like 8 of those, 2 groups of 8, a PCIe Gen 5, and break it out into 16 lanes of PCIe Gen 4 per channel, and then you had a bunch of 8-lane slots on your motherboard, there would be so many people that are like, yes, I will rock a 16-core AM5 CPU all day long. And the dual Vcache version also takes pressure off main memory. And so that turns it into an even better, like small, like Soho workgroup edge server thing. So you got a couple of X16 slots or like 4 X8 slots and a couple X4 slots that are PCIe Gen 4 and 5, a mix of PCIe Gen 4 and 5. That's a very, very capable and viable platform. The IO die is the fly in the ointment there because the IO die in AM5 will hold us back a little bit when you fully utilize everything. So I hope with Zen 6 they're designing it so that some crazy person could come along and design a motherboard and that IO die can fully saturate the available memory channels as well as the PCIe bandwidth.
So do you think the way they would do this, like let's say there's some X990WX chipset they make for Zen 6 when it launches to give you more IO. Do you think that they would do that by having PCIe Gen 6 support that is then broken out? Or do you think they just find a way to do that with Gen 5?
I would like to see it with Gen 6. Gen 6 makes the most sense. And the impetus for them to do that is not because of enthusiasts. It's going to be because of EPYC and because of shortages. Where we are with part shortages, and because AM5 EPYC, it's a foregone conclusion that they're going to do, EPYC for a Zen 6 equivalent. I think it would be a smart business move for them to do that because it's like they're going to sell all the CPUs, all the other CPUs that they could possibly make. And everybody else that can't afford the $50,000 server, you're looking at AM5. And AM5 can better solve those kinds of problems with better connectivity, and somebody is just going to do without, or go to the competing platform, or go to ARM. You know, it's like I can hear the Ampere folks screaming kind of in the back of my head, like Ampere we're still a thing, DDR4 platform, but like that might be a better choice.
Yeah, and I mean, I guess and I'm like looking at a roadmap I have here from within AMD, and it's like, they're going to I guess it's probably public too, I'd assume, that like Venice, which would be Zen 6, goes to PCIe Gen 6, 7 keeps that. They're still using DDR5 actually with Zen 7, which is interesting to me, and Epic. But like, if they're making all of these IO dies for server that have Gen 6 support, that means they figured it out at least there. And if they're making these chiplets that go up to ridiculous core counts, it feels like it would be a waste, because you're saying AM5 server is very popular. It'd be a waste to not make it fully make sense to go to these higher core count servers on AM5 with a proper chipset. Like, why are you designing all of these super high core count dense chiplets that could fit on a smaller platform if you're not also going to do the due diligence to have the proper chipset to support them as well? Is what I'm starting to wonder here.
Yeah, if you had like an edge compute device, all of a sudden 30 cores in that makes more sense, because you could have a little VM host that has like 256 or 512 gigabytes of memory. And the context switching for like user application processes is also beneficial for context switching for those VMs. So like those VMs, like the cores just wake up and go to sleep, but the things that are running on the cores don't really have to migrate. Okay, makes sense.
This piece of content is brought to you by Wondershare Recoverit V14. Even if you back up your files regularly, like I do, to an external drive, your data isn't always necessarily 100% safe. Backup does not automatically mean recovery. Yes, it feels secure to duplicate your files, but something can still go wrong. And that's what most people don't realize, that external backups fail quite often from a whole host of events outside of your main device that you probably aren't putting somewhere else where things can go wrong. They can be dropped, broken mounting connections, depending on how things are stored or connected. File systems can get corrupted, or even just specific files, not the drive itself, becomes unreadable. But that still sucks if that was the file you actually wanted to access. And this is where data recovery tools come in. You see, tools like Wondershare Recoverit V14 are not just there to replace backups, but to handle situations where the backup itself didn't cover what went wrong. Recoverit V14 offers AI smart file recommendations. AI highlights lost photos and videos first, so you don't need to search manually and remember what might be wrong. AI bad sector detection and risk alert also detects drive issues before recovery, avoiding blind attempts, and it supports multiple data loss scenarios and devices. It is simple to use and beginner friendly for a recovery process app. And so, no, it can't magically fix everything, but it can fix far more dead files than you'd think. And without a recovery option, there wouldn't be any chance of recovering something in the event something you didn't plan for goes wrong. And eventually, something you didn't plan for does always happen to all of us. So backup is important, but recovery is what you hope you never need, but you should always be prepared to use and have ready. And so if you want to make sure you are thoroughly protected, check out the link below to get a free trial of Wondershare Recoverit V14. Checking out the trial yourself costs you nothing, but it does help the channel a ton when you download and try out that free trial. So please do so to support Moore's Law is Dead by starting your free trial of Wondershare Recoverit V14 today. Jay Buffet writes in and says, Wendell, have you seen any improvements in Intel's die-to-die latency? Since he looks at more server stuff, I'm hoping he might actually have a bit of a sneak peek at all of the newer stuff coming down the pipe. I ask because the two compute dies on the coming i9, we see, are going to have to deal with latency, and there's a rather obvious gulf in experience in dealing with die-to-die latency between AMD and Intel.
So the latency on the 658X Xeon, it's the desktop version or workstation version of Xeon 6. Somehow Intel improved the latencies there much, much more than I would have predicted. In fact, with DDR5 8000, you can get below 80 nanoseconds latency on registered on RDIMMs, which is, how is this possible? And so Intel has done something unholy there on Xeon 6. The other mind-blowing thing with that is that because of that and because of the memory controller architecture on that, when they moved to desktop, they also improved over server somehow, because the 24 core part can actually saturate 8 channels of DDR5 8000. Now, officially, it only supports DDR5 6000. It's an overclock if you run 8000. But if you run gamer memory 6000, it's significantly better secondary timings, which is still considered an overclock, but also still DDR5 6000. So it's kind of like, when you do that, you can clear 400 gigabytes per second memory bandwidth from a 24 core CPU. The apples to apples comparison with a 24 core Threadripper on the TRX 50 platform, you're looking at about 160 gigabytes per second versus, 400 for 8 memory channels. Or the 9995WX, the best that I can do is about 320 gigabytes per second, and versus 420 on a 24 core 658X.
Do you think AMD's sleeping on this? Because I've seen people bring this up behind the scenes that like AMD came in with Threadripper, Intel just was wiped out of HEDT and Workstation completely. And I've seen more and more people behind the scenes start to recommend Intel workstations again because they give you more of what some people actually want. They don't need 96 cores. They'll be fine with 24, 32, 80 cores. They just want the latest IO for a reasonable price, and they don't want to pay whatever AMD's charging at this point for their Threadripper chip. So do you think there's some weakness there with AMD?
It's so with Sapphire Rapids and Sapphire Rapids Refresh, it wasn't really there. The PCIe to PCIe bandwidth on Sapphire Rapids was also like disturbingly low in some scenarios. Like you had to disable IOMMU. Like there was some kind of a bug there, and I raised that bug, but I never really, I got definitive confirmation back from one of the board AIBs that were like, yes, we have confirmed and we're looking into it. And Intel acknowledged it, but there was never really any kind of like, so, Threadripper was always a better choice up until Xeon 6. And Threadripper is still insanely faster. Like per core, that 24 core Threadripper is going to run circles around the 24 core Xeon from a raw core compute standpoint, unless your workload needs AMX or unless your workload is memory bound. And I think for Intel, like Intel is really weird. They don't know how to be number 2, but there's no shame in being number 2 as good as the 658X is. It is a very good and reasonable showing. And it is also $1,000 less, just the CPU. And if Intel is able to make money and that is a reasonable thing, then they should sell a crap load of those. That is amazing. It's still a $3,000 it's a $1,700 CPU on the Intel side versus a $3,000 CPU on the AMD side with like $1,000 motherboard. And so like for enthusiasts, that's not amazing. But if you need to use a machine like that to get your work done and you need a lot of PCIe connectivity or just high speed storage, like if you got a couple of those Gen 5 Kioxia, enterprise class SSDs because you're chewing through a big database, like AM5 desktop platforms or even like, the 270K plus is just not really an option for you because it can't keep up.
Yeah. Do you think, I don't know if you have your like fingers on the pulse of like the workstation community. Do you think there is a sea change here where people are starting to flip from Threadripper to Xeon Workstation again? Or do you think it's still AMD's like, they're still most of the market and what most people recommend?
The Gartner report the most recent Gartner report that I read that I'm remembering, Threadripper has completely taken over the universe for creative workstations, and Xeon has basically been squeezed out. Xeon 6 just launched for workstations, and because the top line core performance was not as good as Intel partners were expecting, it's also kind of being squeezed out there a little bit. I think Intel might have messed up their messaging a little bit because the core and the IO connectivity on the new one is pretty good, but like it's very hard to like. I tried to buy one of the I think it was a 36 core or 38 core CPU because it got the 24 core, and my order went through and it was fine. and then it was canceled like a week later, and they're like, we don't know, we're gonna get more
That's
stock.
something I've
these.
consistently heard too, is people will say, oh, this new Intel workstation looks really cool, and they'll say, I can't buy it, like it just doesn't exist until like a year after it came out or something.
Yeah, so I think that the Gartner report said that a lot of people that were previously going to buy like a Threadripper workstation or a Xeon workstation, they're just going straight to Epic. Like we just skipped the thing. The other thing from that report was also that a mind-blowing number of workstations are Linux-based. So we talked about like the year of the Linux desktop, and it's like, is Linux going to take over or whatever? For dual socket workstations, it has already taken over the universe. If you have a workstation and it has 2 sockets, it's running Linux, according to the Gartner report, which is okay, interesting. For single socket, it is like 35%, 40%, which is like if you buy a new workstation today, you flip a coin that the workstation is going to be running Linux instead of Windows, and the relationship relates to core count. So like if you're less than 32 cores, it's more likely to be Windows. If it's more than 32 cores, it's more likely to be Linux.
Well, these things cost thousands of dollars. I mean, if you're going to get another 30% performance on Linux, you should probably learn Linux, right? I mean,
or just run your Windows workloads in a VM, because where's the performance penalty? It's like, oh, I need GPUs. Okay, just pass them through hardware. Nvidia has done actually a lot of work in the Blackwell generation to make that experience smoother in terms of virtualization and para-virtualization for Blackwell hardware into Linux virtual machines. I mean, from like a Linux host into Windows virtual machines.
All right. Now, I'm mostly just asking this one for fun, but I have to because I think you're one of the more interesting people to answer this question. Florida Man writes in again, and he says, looking ahead, what would you both like to see from the AM6 platform? Now, let's keep in mind that it would be something in like 2030 or something, right? This is going to be a while from now. But do you have any thoughts on like because I don't think they're going to go to quad channel memory until AM6, for example. I think they're stuck with it, and they're stuck with DDR5. I think we can both assume they'll go to Gen 6, PCIe, and DDR6 in 2030 in the distant future. But like, besides that, what would you want to see out of this platform once they finally start from scratch again?
I think there should be an answer for better allocation of resources in terms of like lanes and external connectivity. Like Thunderbolt 5 is not even really mainstream. Like it's popped up in a few places, but it is already anemically slow, and it's annoying and stupid because it's so slow. And it's like, oh my God, it's 120 gigabit. That's so 2006. More. I need more. It would be amazing if we had some sort of like co-packaged optical chipset that gave us more. It's like, here's your high-speed copper, PCIe Gen 6 interface from the CPU to the chipset, and then USB is optical now, and that just makes a whole class of problems go away. I would, if as long as we're dreaming, I don't think that physically there's enough wiring, like cost reasons and everything else, that it's probably dual channel, and it's probably not DIMMs anymore. It's probably you probably have something that hugs the CPU socket that just like LP cam or something that just, because the memory being physically closer to the socket.
You think AM6 may move away from DIMMs?
Yeah, I mean, it's like, it would make sense to me if they did, because DIMMs are annoying and terrible. Wouldn't it be great if the form factor changed and you had to like put them on the back of the motherboard, and then the heatsink was the case? It's like, oh yeah, I mean,
that'd be pretty cool.
Let's dream big.
And then that frees up more space for, even in an ITX board, NVMe slots for SSDs.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I guess your answer is you want to get rid of DIMMs. Like that would be the realistic thing that you hope they do.
I want to get rid of DIMMs because I want more memory bandwidth, but the desktop memory bandwidth needs to be at least 4 times where we are now. And if you wanted to lean into like modern advanced workloads, you need more memory bandwidth. If you want x86 to be like an ARM experience, one of the places where Apple Silicon has an advantage is absurd memory bandwidth. And there are apologists that can kind of talk you out of having that much memory bandwidth per core. But then you look at the Apple Silicon stuff and it's like, well, I mean, they are doing a good job there. Maybe we should emulate that a little bit.
Yeah, and I think if they did that, that's a way to kind of meet in the middle. It's like, no, we're not going to quad channel memory, but what we will do is not use DIMM, so you have many more options for a higher bandwidth memory to be bolted onto the CPU.
That also makes problems with the APU thing go away, because I think APUs are going to cannibalize a lot of the low end GPUs as well. Like, it makes more sense to just spend
Do they
more
think
on.
they let you slot in GDDR7 if you want to? You think that they would sell?
No.
So you don't think so? It'd still just be the standard. But there could be LPDDR6X, right? Modules.
Yeah.
You put it instead of, and so that's halfway there.
Yeah. In the same way that we have, there are absurdly high speed interfaces. Maybe once co-packaged optical gets to a thing, you can have co-packaged optical memory interfaces, but that's probably, Zen 7 and beyond.
So this one I think will be fun for somebody like you, because this is one of those things I saw coming down the pipeline where this was not on my bingo card. But the Paradoxy writes in and says, Tom has leaked that next-gen low-end RDNA 5 GPUs, namely AT4 and AT3, could potentially choose to go with LPDDR5X and LPDDR6 memory controllers. This is because the GPU chiplet is really just GPU cores and memory controllers that's shared with APUs on laptop. And so then they would just add like a video output die for desktop. What could this mean for local AI? Could you see some businesses using this type of hardware? Since LPDDR has much higher yields than HBM as well, could this potentially help fix the memory shortage? And I think this is fascinating because you have this situation where, like, I don't remember what it was, but technically big RDNA 5 might max out at like 128 gigabytes of GDDR7 in a year or so. But then you have the situation where, because it's LPDDR5X, actually the budget GPU can go to like 128, 512 gigabytes of RAM. Like, I wonder what you think AMD would do with that.
It wouldn't make a terrible, like, even what we have now, with more memory capacity, it wouldn't make a terrible product. If you look at some of the modified things that, like, you modified 3090 with 48 gigs, and modified, was it a 5060 Ti? Somebody put 32 gigs on a 5060 Ti or something crazy like that.
Sure.
Yeah, we need that. That's a thing that should exist. It doesn't necessarily, like, more memory bandwidth gives you the floor of what you're going to experience in terms of token generation for a single thread, but it doesn't really speak a lot about parallelism. And so if you had a couple of 128 gig GPUs that had relatively slow memory, you might be able to get 8 parallel streams on them that are all on the order of like 40 tokens a second. But only one stream can also run at roughly 40 tokens a second, but that's still hugely useful. Like, if you're going to build a local inferencing server or a local AI server or something like that, that's fine. That's a perfectly reasonable architecture, which is why we have crazy stuff like the 32 gig 5060 Ti's and, like a dual 3090 setup with the NVLink bridge is a surprisingly capable local AI solution in 2026.
Yeah, the thing that excites me the most, and it's a very, like, base level gamer take, is I would just love to see the 6060 have like 12 gigs of RAM, and then AMD gives 24 to the 6060 competitor, because I just think that'd be hilarious. But I wonder what you think they would do with pricing, because, like, let's say they do that. They're like, the top gaming chip from AMD next year is like 32 gigs. Their mid-range is 18 gigs. Or something like that. Whatever, that's believable. I think they might do that. But what do you do when you have like a $10,000, or, I mean, honestly, I don't know at this point, $20,000, $30,000 RDNA 5 AI GPU with 128 gigabytes, but then you have a 512 gigabyte GPU that's actually as fast as like a 9060 XT. Like, how do you price that? How do you think they would price that? Would they give it that much RAM too? Would they?
Well, they might. I don't know. It's been really weird. So, like, I borrowed an H200 from Supermicro, and so it's HBM3 plus LPDDR5, and so, but it's unified, so you can address, you can have stuff that's running at the absurdly fast HBM speed as well as like the LPDDR. and one assumes that for these next generations of RDNA that they're going to have more infinity cache, and that infinity cache is going to be effective, and blah, blah, blah.
Actually, from what I've seen, it's gone.
Okay, well,
it's just L2 cache, and I'm curious to see the benchmarks, because if they manage to, it's really fast. GDDR7 probably makes up for this, but from what I saw, some of the top chips only had 40 megabytes of L2. So if they manage to do this sort of boost with that much less cache than before, I mean, they've really captured some black magic here. But sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off.
No, that's surprising. That's very, very surprising, because I would expect that whenever the GPU moves to slower and slower memory, that the problem has been solved elsewhere by hiding the bandwidth in terms of like, oh, we can cache things intelligently, or oh, we are, we're pipelining things in, or whatever. Those kinds of like predictions, like cache is not really super useful in AI, because we haven't figured out an AI architecture that you could pipeline and cache in exactly the same way, which is why it all comes down to memory bandwidth. It's like nothing matters except the raw memory bandwidth, because as it's doing its thing, it's going to need something from somewhere that is basically unpredictable. Even though it's predict the next token, there's no derivative that predicts the prediction. You can kind of get around that with flash attention on the KV side of things, and mixture of experts. But like, man, the mixture of experts, there's a lot to not like about the mixture of experts architecture. But yes, having an absurdly fast memory pool is really good. The other annoying thing with that, though, is going to be if you have a bunch of GPUs that have a really large memory pool, that can also hurt you, because then you need the interface between the GPUs to be really fast. It's like, oh, I'm going to run this 1 trillion parameter model. And it's like, well, 64 gigabytes per second through that PCIe Gen 5 16 lane interface. It's kind of slow when you're rocking 128 gigabytes of memory per GPU.
Yeah. Well, and let me say this too. I think what this probably tells you, if they really do end up not using infinity cache as standard for the first time in many years, is that, well, the consoles probably don't use infinity cache because they didn't last time to save space, and AI wouldn't need it. So I mean, it might be Occam's razor. RDNA 5 surprise is built for the PS6 and AI, because that's where they're going to make all of their money. Let me see here. I think this is kind of on subject. Philippe, and sorry, Philip, I don't even know what some of those characters are on your last name, but he says, hi, Tom and Wendell. Will there be more cards like Intel B70, specifically sub $1,000 GPUs with a lot of VRAM for local deployment? Also, does Google's turbo quant compression help in practice squeeze more juice out of limited VRAM RAM that we lowly gamer peasants already have? And yeah, I think this is interesting, because this ties into what I said before. We're like, how do you even price a 200 gigabyte, 500 gigabyte low-end core GPU? Like, because there's this thing going on where it seems very clear Nvidia would rather cut off a finger than give you 32 gigabytes for less than $1,000. And I worry AMD might think the same for like 24 gigabytes or something. Maybe not, though. Maybe they'll give you 24 gigabyte mid-range cards. But what do you think? Do you think we're going to see other budget high capacity VRAM cards anytime soon?
I don't know. I've seen some demos that use a lot of PCIe Gen 5 storage devices in parallel as another memory tier, and that was a pretty interesting and pretty compelling demo. And so every NVMe device you added in that way was about 15 gigabytes per second read, and it was also SLC, so it was kind of fast. It wasn't Intel Optane levels of fast, but it was pretty fast, and still nowhere near DRAM levels of fast. But it was surprisingly fast to just be 32 lanes of PCIe Gen 5 wide for the demo, which gives.
I'm a little surprised they haven't tried that more too, right? Because Roger Kadori messed around with that with Vega. Like, a little surprised that even a console hasn't. I guess PS5 kind of has tried it, but like, just put a really fast SSD on the GPU, run the whole game off of that or some application. I'm surprised we haven't seen more of that.
The thing that made it fast was the parallelism. So it'd be hard to replicate that in a desktop, but in a server, it's like, oh yeah, I can totally give you 64 lanes of PCIe Gen 5 to try to address this problem. And that was a pretty good effect, a pretty good multiplier effect being able to do that. I think if the memory shortage wasn't so acute, the pricing answer would be wildly different than what it is today. Samsung also announced a breakthrough where they claim that they're going to be able to pack in 50%. The DRAM density is 50% higher, and if that's true, then they can create memory that's going to be 50% more dense, presumably for not 50% more money. So that would be pretty awesome if that actually comes to pass. But really, the Google thing for KV cache does take some of the pressure off of KV cache, but there are other breakthroughs like flash attention. It's not a night and day difference, but it does little optimizations add up. There's definitely a lot of commercial incentive right now to find a way to have high fidelity models that behave well, that also don't consume as much memory as possible. And actually, if you have a GPU that has 32 gigs, like a 5090, you could try Qwen 3.6 in the 8-bit quantization. And once you experience how good that model is in just 32 gigs of VRAM, and then you try a 32 gig model from say last year, like try one of the smaller Llama models that fits in 32 gigs of VRAM, like Llama 2 or Llama 3. That's a year old. And you just compare the quality output from Qwen 3.6 to Llama, it's shockingly different. And so the intelligence per token is through the roof. And so in that respect, you could say that the pressure on having all of the VRAM is lessened somewhat as well.
So I wasn't planning to talk about this with you, but you're definitely going in a direction where I can't help myself. A big debate. I know you don't really usually talk about consoles much, but a big debate with the PlayStation 6 is how much RAM is this thing going to get? And my overall answer so far is we don't know yet, because Sony's going to wait until they're definitely not going to buy the RAM now for it. And so they're probably going to try to see if RAM prices start going down early to mid next year and then sign a big contract with Samsung and SK Hynix, whatever. But the way the PlayStation 6 handheld and the PlayStation 6 home console are configured is that you basically could have up to 48 gigabytes of LPDDR5X for the handheld. I don't think they'll go with 48. Or they could go up to 40 gigabytes of GDDR7 with the PlayStation 6. And I've been saying this for a while. My opinion is they will go with either 30 or 40 gigabytes for the console, and then 24 or 36 gigabytes for the handheld. And they'll try to have, handheld will have less RAM, but it runs at low resolution, so who cares? But I wonder, how much do you think is enough? Because I've asked game devs, and they always want infinite amounts of RAM, frankly. But their answer for me, and they seem to believe that AI is going to be a huge push with next-gen consoles in some way to really make the experiences feel new. Their opinion is maybe you could get away with 24 gigabytes in a low-res handheld, and you could probably get away with 30 gigabytes in the PS6, although they would really, really prefer it to be 40. If you're going to, go to next gen amounts of next gen looking textures, actually try to run closer to native 4K, how small do you think you can get a model and fit on there? Because the way I think about how much RAM would be enough would be, I think you need at least look, they're going to optimize these things to hell. So they don't need as much RAM as running on Windows or even Linux. But, I think at least 12 gigabytes for the VRAM, maybe 16 next gen. You want at least 12 to 16 for the running the game itself. And then you'll have a couple gigs left over for the operating system. Do you think you can fit a language model in 4 gigabytes that is as competent as what we have now in a year or two? How much do you think they would need to have a working language model that would be good enough for adding next gen experiences to games?
I think that if you have to run, it depends. So if we're talking just voice recognition, and you could feed voice recognition into a not super intelligent model, you can do that easily in hundreds of millions of parameters. So we're not even at a gigabyte, and that would also run really fast and not consume a ton. That could also run on an NPU. You could have an NPU that is just doing some really lightweight.
The
AI
Xbox
tasks.
has one. Yeah.
So That would be fine. I think the handheld, just for power reasons, is probably going to be in the 16 to 20 gigabyte range, would be my guess. And you might have a pro version of the console that has 30 gigabytes, but I think they're really gonna lean on lower memory footprint. I think that they're going to rely on upscaling technologies, and they're going to rely on not having to render native 4K.
Mm-hmm.
And I think the largest model that they would possibly run would be on the order of like 4 to 6 billion parameters. I think that.
And so, how many gigabytes would that take up?
Well, it depends. If it's a Q4, like if you have some 4-bit optimizations, it's only half. So if you ran a 7 billion parameter model, which would be the absolute largest, that's going to be like 3.5 gigabytes of memory. And you can play with.
You think they could get away with 24 gigabytes?
Yeah, I think there's going to be a strong financial incentive on them to get away with as much of a memory restriction as possible, and so they're going to be leaning on all kinds of technologies to try to make that happen, from upscaling to texture compression, whatever version of texture compression that they can get away with. If they can get some kind of AI based, texture compression, whatever.
You could even bake it into the silicon, like a dedicated compressor,
Yeah, and I think they'll also be leaning on NPU type silicon for SDK features, and maybe for voice recognition. I'm very surprised that no one has done, and maybe somebody has, but I just haven't seen it, a mod for Skyrim where you can give Lydia intelligence. And it's your AI companion is like, you need to take all our crap back to the place and sell it. And she's like, all right, sounds good. And then you just have a cloud of companions that you follow around, and you just talk to her. And it's like, hey, I want you to scour the dungeon for me for this, and let me know. Or it's like, I'm a ranger, I want you to scout ahead. Is there anything that we can take out? And it's like, okay, sounds good.
Watch my back while we're going down this cave. Don't let someone pick up on me.
Yeah, and the mod just does it. It's like that's a thing. Like, we could do that today. There's no reason that we couldn't do that today.
Yeah, because it's obvious. You don't need talk to any insiders to know that, like, the thing that they're going to want to use to make the PS6 stand apart from the PS5 is a new experience, not just a higher resolution. And the way you do that is not necessarily randomly generated, or wouldn't be random, I guess, AI generated content. It's just in Fallout 5, can I please not just have 4 options? Can I just tell them what I think? We can clearly kind of do that already. And then they just do it in a non-stupid way. I mean, like, that would completely change how a game feels. That's a fairly simple concept. So you think you could have all of that fit in like a gigabyte, actually? Like, we don't need 8 gigabytes for just the AI stuff in like Fallout 5. You think 1 gigabyte's fine?
Probably like 2 or 3. One, I would be impressed if you got it down to like 1, but like 2 or 3, maybe 4, somewhere in that neighborhood. For like the Lydia, auto companion experience. Sure. Yeah, I think so. I think you could also have a lot of other experiences like that in the game, in terms of other NPC interaction, and also delegating things, and just various random kinds of chit chat, because it doesn't take a super intelligent model to do that.
This spring, Jessie, like many Belgian Malinois, is starting her own logging company outside. And I gotta say, watching her do this, it's bizarre. It's almost as weird as someone paying full price for Microsoft Office or operating systems, and that is why this piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. That's right, once again, the longest running sponsor actually of Moore's Law is Dead, CDkeyoffer.com, is sponsoring this piece of content, and that's because I just think it's something that should be out there, something that our community should always know about, and that is reasonably priced Microsoft keys, and also deals on different pieces of software like games as well on their website. Now, if you're interested in supporting Moore's Law is Dead, and thus supporting a sponsor that supports Moore's Law is Dead, go to CDkeyoffer.com through the link below. Just clicking on that link helps a ton. But then if you do go there and want to buy something, make sure you use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% on all Microsoft software, and Die Shrink to save 3% off everything else on the website. Again, they've been a great sponsor this whole time. I love working with them. It's easy to work with them, and they provide a service I think this community needs: reasonably priced Microsoft keys. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDkeyoffer.com today.
Let me see here. All right. So Carbon Cry writes in and says, as someone who uses LLMs extensively for work and is excited for the promise of AI tech like vector database replacing OS search, I'm concerned current subsidized AI is actually unsustainable. The alternative could be local AI. I mean, we're kind of seeing that with the cloud too, becoming more local. But what is actually possible locally? Is a vector database possible? What about LLM on the level of Chat GPT-4? What hardware tier is needed to run either locally?
I would say right now it is already possible to run GPT-4 level hardware for less than about $20K.
Okay.
And so
Strix Halo isn't doing it. You're gonna have a bigger, like my minis forum little mini PC ain't gonna be doing that. I think a lot of people are wondering. I'm not gonna pull up the exact question, but we got a few that were about this. Do you think in like 2 years you could get a 3000? Like again, the minis forum. Like it wouldn't be Strix Halo, but like Medusa Halo, something that's cost effective for doing it. Do you think we'll be in a place where you can do something that's as good as ChatGPT, like 5? Or like I use Gemini Pro. That's the one I actually like a lot. Like it's as good as that, or honestly, ideally better. And you can just install it quickly on like a $3,000 mini PC and it runs well. Because I think a lot of people would actually be interested in that for security reasons, so that Sam Altman doesn't have all of my purchasing history and whatever the heck else they're scraping. Do you think that will be actually quite doable in a couple of years?
Yes. The price is going to fall on the hardware. And even if you have Sam Altman buying up every little scrap of hardware, the hardware that we have now is going to improve dramatically. Like from when Strix Halo launched until now, if you look at Qwen 3.6, like Qwen 3.6 you can run right now on Strix Halo, and it is mind-blowing quality. It is shockingly insane. The 35 billion parameter model with 3 billion active parameters is absolutely just bananas how good of quality it is. Now, you can screw up your installation. You can get the temperature wrong. You can have the tool calling template wrong. Like there's a lot that you can do wrong. But you can set that up, and it's amazing. But these models are not all or nothing. You can actually set up a little orchestra of agents, which is kind of what I have. There's an open source project that is put together by one of our forum randos that I help work on sometimes. It's called Turnstone. And so if you look on GitHub, there's a project called Turnstone from Turnstone Labs. And this is like an agentic orchestration platform, like OpenClaw, but it is more of an enterprise mindset, and it's a lot safer. And I can run a bunch of small models that all have different roles that work together. And then when they encounter something that is too complicated for them to handle, they could submit it to Anthropic, or they could submit it to OpenAI. And in this way, if you use this strategically, you are dramatically reducing the amount of cloud tokens that you are spending.
So this is interesting. I want to throw this idea at you. Is there any chance this endless spending to build data centers right now is a bit misplaced, because we're already on the cusp of the next part of the AI revolution, which is just everyone has this at home and it's more secure and it uses less energy because not everyone has to use it. And like, are all these data centers going to be done right when DeepSeek makes something anyone can download and put on that PC, and we don't really need that data center as much anymore?
There probably is an aspect of that, but what is driving the data center expansion is the level of greed and kind of the rationale of winner takes all. Because if you look at really old computers, like in the 60s, it's like there wasn't enough mercury on planet Earth, because at one time those old computers needed a lot of mercury, like a scary amount of mercury, in order to do their thing. It's like, we should figure out a way to not need mercury. And it's like, it didn't take long, and then thus was born the transistor. And the transistor changed everything, but you couldn't have predicted the transistor from the days before the transistor. I think we'll actually get to the breakthrough that'll probably happen is probably going to be at the corner of like ASML and microfabrication and carbon nanotubes and individual atomic manipulation. So we will come up with a way of doing manufacturing that is more advanced than photolithography, that probably looks like a cross between inkjet printing technology and individual atomic manipulation. And then we're just printing the hardware in sheets, and assembling it layer by layer, at nanoscale, as we move into like angstroms and beyond for photolithography. Like, it's amazing that we've been able to do stuff with photolithography. It's going to be one for the history books. And when those manufacturing processes are available, it's probably going to change everything in terms of, you look at what Google is doing, and you look at the separation between inferencing and training, and you look at what Cerberus has done with wafer scale, and you look, Nvidia is hanging on to we want basically general purpose compute in GPUs, even though it's not really general purpose in the same sense that CPUs are general purpose. But then they're also bolting on Grok on the side, and so that specialization sort of locks us into software choices. There may be a software breakthrough that invalidates the awesomeness of Grok, but it might take a couple of generations of hardware for that to catch up. And so it's all Wild West. You don't know what is happening. I know that there's a lot of GPUs that have been built and assembled that cannot be turned on because there is physically not enough power, or it's like, okay, we're reordering from order of who ordered into order of who can turn these things on. And so, like the Wall Street people are kind of looking at that and freaking out a little bit. And rightly so. In economically, at what point economically will the investment be recouped? And the only answer is if there is a 25x in planetary GDP. One of my favorite examples is from Uncle Bob Martin. He's one of the guys that came up with like the Agile process a long time ago, and he has videos, and he's found himself again on social media, and I'd love to do a video with him sometime. But one of his talks, he talks about how many transistors are in an iPhone, and it's like 1 trillion transistors in an iPhone because storage transistors count. And if you look at the GDP of the planet in like 1969 or whatever, the GDP of the planet could produce, and the cost of a transistor in 1969, the GDP of the entire planet could produce one iPhone. That's his example. And, now it's like an iPhone, it's like not really a big deal.
Well, so this perfectly leads into this question. The Paradox, he writes and says, "Hi, Wendell. Thanks for all the wonderful content that you and the others at Level 1 produce. I've been loving the Linux weekly videos specifically. Can you talk a bit about the difference between giant AI data centers and local AI, and really what makes you optimistic about AI? Because I'm assuming it's not DLSS 5. Also, what's the value of being able to own your own hardware?"
It's really okay. If you look at it, if you make some assumptions that will make some people angry, but if you look at what Anthropic and OpenAI offer in the cloud, we don't really know a lot about mechanically how that's put together and like hardware that runs on. We know a little bit because Microsoft loves to talk about their infrastructure and models and that kind of thing. And we know a lot about DeepSeek and the DeepSeek team and ZAI, and there's a lot of AI teams there's a lot of academic papers you can read. And so like we can infer things, but those are absurdly huge models. And it does make sense from an economic standpoint to consolidate that infrastructure, and everybody can share it and use it, and it runs. That's great. The problem is that those people will want to monetize it every which way that they can because of the absurd investment and make money back. And there's also a perverse incentive for those people to lock up anybody else from having that access.
Yes.
And so how I know that local models are shockingly good is that in the beginning, those companies didn't care because they were looking at their massive investments and they were saying an individual can never spend this much money. They can't touch us. We don't have anything to worry about competitively. Meta was looking at this. Mark Zuckerberg is, we don't even have to joke about it. Like, does he have the best interests of humanity? No. Lord, no. And so Meta, of all companies, was perfectly comfortable releasing Llama. Why? Because this is the result of Llama is completely unobtainable to anybody, but it's an amazing Trojan horse because you can run Llama on your own systems and you can see there's no harm. There's nothing here. It's totally fine. But It's frozen in time. And frozen in time, it certainly has been, because other companies have come out with better things, and Meta's just kind of like, Llama, Llama 3. But it's good in that you can look at Llama and you can say, I can run Llama locally and it's fine. And it works, well for what it does. But if Meta is 75 light years ahead, do you want to run Llama? No, you want to run whatever they're running. And that's what Anthropic and certainly Sam Altman are also counting on. But you look at recent memos out of that Anthropic and OpenAI have signed off on, and it is, there's a threat. There's a threat from foreign actors taking open weight models and using those open weight models, and they're distilling against the good, awesome models that we have here at OpenAI, and here with Claude and ChatGPT, and it's like, this is a little bit of the pot calling the kettle black, isn't it? Because you guys stole every copyrighted work, like literally anything you could get your hands on.
Hilarious,
it's just
actually.
But there is a memo circulating in the United States administration that says, like, this is a national security threat because open weight models have been, they've used our model to do all this stuff. It is not about that. It has nothing to do with that. It is regulatory capture. And that the fact that memo exists tells me that these companies see the utilities of small models running locally. So on Strix Halo, it's like, you can't, like, if I need help with my ReFS thing, like a local model on Strix Halo doing that is a little disappointing. But I'll tell you what's not disappointing is that model helping me manage paperless documents, that model helping me organize files on my file system. I can just be like, here is my horribly disorganized project that works, but I would like to organize it and maybe do some unit tests, build some unit tests for this project, maybe deploy it to GitHub, like clean this up and organize it and improve on my documentation. And if I let some LLM agents running on Strix Halo do that kind of agentically, Hermes and other Turnstone is fantastic. For those kinds of tasks, it is already extremely good. Helping put together a unit test or helping distill a project or just helping do like the linty bookkeeping, like yucky, annoying, dumb stuff. Those models are already incredibly competent at doing that kind of stuff, and it runs locally. And that is tens of millions to hundreds of millions of cloud tokens that I did not spend. Mm-hmm. And that is what's keeping those companies up at night.
Yeah, I mean, there could be I haven't thought about it this way before. This could be how this becomes like a pets.com and AOL.com situation where people look at pets.com and they're like, well, it was just ahead of its time, actually. And it's like, well, not really. I mean, pet food is like one of the last things you need to be able to order instantly, actually. Like, so it really didn't make sense they did that first. And, but you can still look at it and go, it was kind of just Amazon before Amazon. And yet, how did they fail? And it's just like their model didn't work. And I wonder if there's a thing going on here. Like, and people don't like when you compare like pets.com or Enron to OpenAI. But it's like, I understand OpenAI is doing things that are more impressive than those companies did back then. And I understand that's why you don't want to compare it. But at the end of the day, eventually, OpenAI is spending hundreds of billions of dollars to build something that once built, no one needs OpenAI for. So has anyone considered that that's how this ends, is DeepSeek just kills them or Google kills them and Google will just use it in all their apps. They're fine. They already have the thing to use it for. OpenAI doesn't have the thing to use it for. And once it's built, no one needs their data centers. No one needs them.
The conclusion that I came to was even the very best AI that runs autonomously, or even if you have an AI that fulfills the promise of complete autonomy, you are still going to need people that know what needs to happen in order to execute that. And the better and more competent the AI is, the greater the cognitive load on the individual. And the ultimate commodity, it is literally just going to be who has the cheapest electricity, because the token that's generated for Will Smith eating spaghetti, or figuring out where my property tax receipt goes, is the same token. And I'm running arbitrage on my Strix Halo, and it's figuring out, who is the cheapest if the Strix Halo is too dumb to do those types of an evaluation. And so it can't not be a race to the bottom in terms of token cost. The only path for your business model to make sense is if you capture the model and like you have the smartest model and it works. But the problem is that it's open and there's a lot of open weights, and the whole thing was built on all of the knowledge of mankind, which, it's like, oh, there's going to be a lot of people that are saying, oh, because this, we need to have justice because it was stolen info. But that's actually a more useful argument to OpenAI than the citizens, like random people. I think for random people, the argument is, no, it's already stolen. This, the genie's already out of the bottle. Just let us have it, because you're going to benefit from it. You're going to benefit from it behind closed doors. Why can't we also benefit from it from open doors? And that seems to be the attitude that some AI research teams are taking. The other AI research teams are saying something else entirely.
Yes, only we're allowed to steal.
Yeah.
HMS writes in and says, hi, Tom and Wendell. It's been 6 months since Sam Altman destroyed the consumer electronics market. Prices for memory and SSDs are trickling down slowly, though, but still up quite a bit from where they were last summer. My question, though, is what do you believe the next 6 months are going to look like? LPDDR6 should be rolling out end of this year. Most products we're excited about will be coming in 2027. And the AI bubble might be a long deflate instead of a sudden pop. Maybe.
I don't, shipping constraints the world is currently experiencing throw a bit of a wrench into things.
A great time for an energy crisis.
Yeah, great time for an energy crisis. I think it's a coin toss as to whether I think the bubble is going to pop fairly quickly, more quickly than people expect. And I think it's a coin toss as to whether or not that happens in the next 6 months. But I'll tell you how it happens. And that is the amount of memory that is needed for these kinds of things is going to be less than was estimated. It was in Sam Altman's interest to lock up the memory supply for competitive control as much as anything, because again, I would say, there are signs of internal abject panic that the open models are as good as they are. And it's not just Quinn. I mean, there's also Gemma 4. And, the wild thing about these is that if you look on Reddit, sometimes like the Reddit posts for Gemma 4 and even Quinn and Minimax 2.5, I think there was a couple, I don't think they released 2.7, but there's 2.5. There's a lot of complaints. And the complaints were not actually problems with the models. The complaints were to do with tool calling and the chat template and little quirks. Like the companies did things is like, okay, this is a really advanced model, so we want you to have a think token at the beginning of the template. And people were just like, let me just try to run this model in my, VLM or whatever. And they didn't read the documentation. They didn't read how to set it up. And so it's like, it's not thinking. It's really dumb. It's like, well, you have to send the think token if you want it to think. Like, did you read the documentation? There were also some bugs with Google's early release. The same kind of thing. It's like they rushed it out the door and it was like, oops, forgot to dot the I's and cross the T's. Our bad. We forgot to explain the thing about how to use it because we've been using it internally and having a delightful time. We forgot to tell you. So the initial impressions from those models were not great. But then if you go back and you fix the stuff and it's like, oh my gosh, these models are really fantastic internally, locally. As long as we maintain this cadence of competition and releasing the models and this kind of thing for what you can run locally, it's good. If one of those companies turns off the spigot, or if they can all be convinced to turn off the spigot, then it's really bad. There might be like a little bit of a winter of discontent. But I think there'll be a similar open source movement. Like there will be personalities that rise up and say, no, we're going to go back to whatever. And we too will steal the entire internet and shove it into the model. And then here we go. And maybe we'll, I don't know. Distributed training is really hard because you spend all your cycles verifying the integrity versus doing the distributed training. Distributed training is something I've thought a lot about, and it's really hard to do distributed training and not waste all your time that you should be spending training on verifying that somebody's not trying to foul up the training, which they would definitely do.
So yeah, because it's interesting the way I've recently said, like, how does this bubble pop? And it's like, I think there's many ways it could really, but I think there's really two key ways this thing happens. Is it's just right now we already have an energy crisis. I don't think, like, just from what I've read from the people I think are intelligent, even if the war in Iran ended right now, the strait's closed for 6 months, basically. I mean, effectively. And this is causing all of these constraints and all of these issues at the same time that TSMC is, kind of running out of capacity and energy, right? I think the way this could end is like Nvidia can't get the chips they ordered. And when they can't get the chips they ordered, everyone realizes all of this on paper money at all these companies, these data centers aren't going to get built. And then just boom, there's some panic over like it's not about the RAM. It's like, what if they can't make H200, or something?
I'll give you a different doomsday scenario in those terms, and that is, I think Nvidia already has. I say Nvidia. I don't really mean Nvidia. I say there exists inventory of Nvidia product, not under Nvidia's balance sheet necessarily. I want to say that there's probably $2 billion of inventory sitting around globally that is not turned on. Like the GPUs are just sitting there. I think Nvidia has very stringently met their production goals. I think TSMC has very, diligently met their production goals. And there's literally nowhere to plug them in globally. And some of it is a delivery problem, a logistics problem, but I think most of it's not a logistics problem. I think most of it is a power capacity problem. I can't, the canary in the coal mine is, can I, as a rando, go rent a single machine that has 8 B200 GPUs? And right now the answer to that is no. But I can rent a machine that has 1 or 2 B200s, which is interesting because that's an improvement over even just a month ago. And now I can rent a machine that has 8 B200s for a month. If I want to rent it for a month at a time, not a problem, which is, again, an improvement over a month ago. But if I want to rent it for an hour at a time, I've got a little bit more of a problem there. I can rent a machine that has 8 RTX 6000s. That's a change from even 2 weeks ago, which is, again, like, is there I'm reading the tea leaves here? What's going on? But I think that there is already billions of dollars of inventory. And I think once we pass probably $3 or $3.5 billion of inventory, there's that much of a lag between, like, we have these GPUs, we can't turn them on. There's nowhere to plug them in and turn them on. Then I think maybe we start seeing the brakes pumped and it becomes a little bit of a sliding tile puzzle because more power will come online and more capacity will come online. And it's like, oops, forbidden China has power capacity. How do we get the GPUs to China? Maybe we do it indirectly through some other, mediary. And so
why does everyone in Singapore own 4 5090s? Yes.
Yeah. And so I think that things like that will help slowly drain that, $2 to $4 billion of inventory of product. But I think we're already in the $2 billion neighborhood, and that is already enough to make a lot of investors nervous. And I think when it sails past $4 billion, I think that's when the bubble starts to pop and things start to collapse. And I
think what I poorly said before is I think what we both said can be true. Is what I'm really trying to get at is like it's not enough that you do the math. We've all seen the chart with all the Venn diagrams shared by everyone of like they're all selling things back and forth to each other, but like clearly that's not enough to pop the bubble. Is realizing that it's clearly a bubble where people are just trading GPUs back and forth on balance sheets that they're not really using. I think what has to happen is something actually happens as a result of that. Is it they can't order more GPUs, which makes investors go, well, that means they won't be able to build the data centers. And then in realizing that, they actually check and they're like, oh, wait, they already have warehouses of their GPUs. They're not. So not only can they not order them, so literally what they're proposing is literally impossible. They're also not even building them already. Like, what makes them, and then at the same time, is there a you don't even need these data centers anymore moment? Like, I feel like that's kind of, and to actually answer HMS's question, I'm realizing here, like, so do you think this is probably happening in the next 6 months? And I know this is the question no one wants to answer because it's such a, like, you can't ever be sure. If you were sure, you'd be a billionaire now because you'd make some bet, right? But like, do you think it's maybe in 6 months, 12 months, or like, what do you think it is coming to a head? What do you think the next 12 months looks like in consumer electronics because of this?
I think the chances are greater that in the next 12 months there will be some sort of catastrophic dislodging. And odds are, I think that, like I say, it's a coin toss that it's going to be the next 6 months. And the odds are probably a little better than that for the 6 months following that.
Right.
That it does come to a head, and then there is a problem. Now, you could use that hardware, like the hardware taken and like used locally. There is an aspect of that. You can do that. But the power requirements for the next
Right.
generation stuff. The stuff that we were seeing at GTC is like planned now for 600 kilowatts per rack, and that is not happening unless we figure out fusion and like nuclear capacity comes online in record time. I mean, Microsoft's bringing 3 Mile Island back online.
Right.
It's just crazy prescient. So yeah, I mean, local AI. The immediate threat for local AI is that the local AI is already smart enough on machines that cost 20 grand or less to dramatically reduce your cloud tokens. At the same time, if we're having trouble spinning up more cloud capacity, and if more businesses are trying to use AI and failing, that is also increasing the cost of the token. And so if you have bad managers that are telling programmers to use AI, you are driving up the rate the tokens are being used. Also, if you look at the AI and like thinking AI and you look at what it's thinking about, it's like second guessing itself and doing all kinds of crazy stuff. You're paying for those tokens.
Yeah.
Those tokens where it's like losing its mind are tokens that you pay for, whereas you could use
ChatGPT argues with me over the schematics in some solar system I'm building. I send it to Gemini, and Gemini's like, "It's wrong," and here's the page that shows it's wrong. I that's maybe stop using ChatGPT. Actually, I couldn't believe that, but all that arguing with it when I'm like, "No, I'm pretty sure you're wrong. I'm looking at the manual. I think you're wrong," and it's like, "I'm not wrong." That
you're paying for those tokens.
Yeah.
It's at the same time that you're paying for those tokens. Look at all of the outrage and belly aching from folks complaining about Anthropic changing how. There's a crazy thing with Anthropic right now. If you have a Hermes.md in your Git repository, it assumes that you're using it with OpenClaw or Hermes, and it bills you at a different rate based on the textual contents of the thing that you're using it for code assist, even if you're using it for code assist within their terms of service. And it's like, oh, we were not prepared for the level of whatever. And it's like, all right, fine. We'll just, I'll run it locally and maybe not as competently. It's maybe the 1.0 Will Smith eating spaghetti, but I can get work done with that level of Will Smith. Like, I am confident enough in my own abilities that even if the functionality is not as good as what it is in the cloud, the cost delta and the complexity delta is not enough different that it makes sense for me not to use the tool. So like the tool is already good enough that if you have the hardware to run it locally, it's like, yeah, it's not as good as the cloud, but you also don't have to endure the crazy. And if the crazy is only going to go up exponentially because they can't bring more data centers online and they can't bring the cost per token down and they have to bring the cost per token way up to recoup their investments, then that is only going to accelerate all of the other things that will lead to a bubble pop scenario, including not needing the memory capacity in the first place.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. And, we'll see. They can clip me here. I think there's endless times I've said this where people will be able to clip me if they want to dunk on me if I'm wrong. But, like, people are worried, like, the PS6 and the Helix. Well, Helix might cost more because it's basically just a big, powerful PC. But people are worried the PS6 will be like $1,000. I'm like, I don't know, guys. I don't think RAM prices in the middle of next year are going to be where they are now. I just don't. I think there's something clearly going on where Sony's timing purchasing stuff right when there's a pivot back towards consumer products. Could be wrong, but I think that's clearly what they're going to try to time late 27, early 28. I just can't see this continuing the way it is for another 18 months straight. I just can't.
Yeah, no, it's not. I don't think so either. It doesn't. Some of this will also be like the bad managers that are like, we must use AI tools. There will be catastrophic financial consequences from that, and they will probably also stop doing that, which may also reduce the price pressure on tokens. But because they're pricing in like everybody's going to need these for like the next 5 or 10 years, I don't think so. I think they're going to get stuck with an ungodly infrastructure.
Mm-hmm. All right. Final question. As always, we tend to go long with you, but I can't help myself. I have to ask you this one quick because I'm really curious what you say. DLM writes in, hi, Tom and Wendell. With NVIDIA building AI hardware first and then using it for gamers, have you heard any serious effort to use these AI cores for like actual rendering? I don't mean upscaling, but like actual geometry, something like NERFS or light field scenes. Also, I can't get it out of my mind that because AI processors are basically just matrix
multiply machines, vaguely similar to GPUs, that you really should be able to use them for raster as well, even if only in a brute force way for backwards compatibility. If ML-based hardware becomes standard, like when 3D became dominant, you could still run 2D operations on them when they weren't powerful enough. So what do you think about this, and like a little bit of the DLSS 5 of it all? Like, what do you think?
I mean, certainly Nvidia is leaning into neural rendering, and what you just described sounds like neural rendering with more steps. So, I think the first problem that you would encounter there is probably latency. A lot of GPU hardware before now was built to guarantee that you would create certain operations, you would complete certain operations in certain amounts of time. And I don't know that with like tensor cores and everything else that much of a design emphasis exists in those kinds of scenarios. So like when you have you don't want branchy code, you don't want a lot of if-else stuff to happen on the GPU, because the penalties for that, relatively speaking, are kind of insane. And so could you use that? I mean, it's just math. It's just matrix multiplication. But it's maybe not the right kind of math. This would be a good, you could in a weekend, I think, someone that is familiar with graphics programming could probably do a proof of concept with AI assistance surprisingly quickly, and see what that looks like.
So I guess let me ask you this point blank too. My opinion, or I guess I'll be honest, this is just what I'm hoping happens. I really don't like DLSS 5. I really don't. I do not like what they showed. It's not DLSS either. DLSS is upscaling. This is something else they're laundering into DLSS 5. So try to not have, well, DLSS, it was called AI, but they're trying to avoid the AI slot backlash, but it already happened.
That was a bad way to avoid the AI slot backlash.
Yeah, it didn't work.
It didn't. You ever watch the movie A Scanner Darkly, where it's like you wear the thing and it like changes your face so that you can't be surveilled as like this, the government agents is like, oh, the way that they do privacy is a mask that they wear that constantly changes what their face looks like, so it's impossible to know. The DLSS 5 demos they showed made me think, I was like, oh, this is the Scanner Darkly filter for the game. And it's like, And then I was not convinced when they said later, it's like, oh, this is just lighting changes. And it's like, I don't know.
No, their face change shape. I don't think it's just lighting, guys.
Yeah, well, wouldn't it? Okay, if this is a thing, wouldn't it be better to build this tool not in the render pipeline, but in the game creation pipeline?
Wendell, I made that argument in my initial reaction videos. Like half of it, like clearly you would make this as a tool for indie devs, and you can throw assets that they don't have time. Like my example, they don't have time to go to Iceland and mega scan a mountain like the Death Stranding 2 people can. Like, so they make the cheap assets, they throw it in the box, comes out of the box, and they say these assets look better. Well, the reason NVIDIA wouldn't want to do that is because they don't want it to run on AMD hardware. That's why they want to do it locally. That's why. But I think what's probably going to happen is NVIDIA massively tunes this down, and they say, oh, you guys all were haters for no reason. It was never going to look like that. We told you it was early, and what they're really doing is just kind of stripping out half of the AI stuff because it didn't go over well. Or maybe not. Maybe they double down and people get mad, because people are pretty mad at AI, I think, even somewhat irrationally. I don't think it's going to be good marketing to like show that.
You'll know that I've won the lottery when I release the Skyrim mod that replaces every character with Danny DeVito, because that's been one of the long running jokes on the channel, is like what AI will have. Like AI is very quickly where I can just sit down and it's like, I want to watch Lord of the Rings, but I would like my AI assistant to replace every character with Danny DeVito, and it does it convincingly. And I have some clips. We're more than halfway there. I would say it's kind of disturbing.
But so do you really think NVIDIA sticks with that? And do you think this would really work? Because every demo I've seen for neural rendering, I think it looks horrible. And by the way, there is a real argument here that it doesn't matter if this is how you want to do things. If the entire game developer industry says we refuse to use this, like you can say it's inevitable. They can make it not inevitable, actually. Because I just think the way it's used is to like help devs make assets. You know, you might be able to use it to like upgrade some lighting or something, which is not what they were doing with DLSS 5. And I think there could be an interesting scenario next gen
if AMD comes in and they just double down on ray tracing and raster performance, and then it can also be used to like as an AI GPU, but they don't try to make it good at neural rendering. And then Nvidia actually loses ray tracing and raster, but tries to sell you on a 1690 that has DLSS 5, and that's why you would want it instead of AMD. And what if that was a miscalculation? I don't know. Like I just wonder if you see those ideas I'm throwing around panning out.
I think the best feature, the best new feature for our DLSS 5 possible future is more on the game dev side, is more on this is a tool to help you put together a more realistic, like one of the fun things of Cyberpunk was that it felt so dirty. And so like it feels real because there's like garbage everywhere, and there's literally just garbage everywhere. But then it felt like once you've played for more than 20 minutes, it felt kind of samey. Mm-hmm. And imagine the Cyberpunk world, but with all those locked doors filled with things, or just filled with randos and filled with, millions of hours of dialogue from synthetic, players and that kind of thing. That's not DLSS 5. That doesn't have anything to do with visual fidelity. That is building, as a world building, but world building within some rules, that an AI can follow. Because some of the best literature, like Lord of the Rings, had to do with the world building, and some of the best video games and that kind of thing. Some of it was left to your imagination. Some of it you just got enough detail to fill that in. And so if DLSS is used as a tool where the game developer can say, this is what I want you to feel, this is how, what I want you to evoke, this is the art direction, and it's a tool that helps the game, the artistic vision come to life a little better, then great. But if it's just eye candy, that's better off being like a mod. It's like I think so somebody did a cell shading mod for Skyrim. It's like, I would like to play Skyrim and have it look like Borderlands. That's not something we should build into the driver.
Mm-hmm. Well, and all this stuff you're describing, none of it has to be done in real time. The dev just uses AI to generate stuff in the game ahead of time, and then, quick Q&A, maybe even AI Q&A testers going through. And yeah, you were able to create every house has an interior, not because you're randomly guessing at the interior as your character walks around. They just had a server rack that generated that for them ahead of time. None of this needed to be done locally.
Yeah, and you can have an autonomous player doing some stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I did some fun building my own. Nvidia has some really amazingly good like video search and summarization AIs, and just for shits and giggles, I hooked up one of the Nano KVM Pros, which has hooks in it for model context protocol, and so like you can have an AI agent controlling a KVM over the network. And so I was like, here, AI agent, play some Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And then I generated like visual glitches in Shadow of the Tomb Raider. And it was like, hey, which clips exhibited weirdness that maybe the game dev should look into? And it was like, these clips were a little different. You should maybe look at them. But these other clips I think were fine. And having that be an autonomous part of your Q&A that a rando that knows nothing, can get cobbled together in a weekend is kind of mind-blowing.
Yeah, they'll be doing that very quickly, I think, where you can have parameters generate parts of the game, but then 1,000 AI Q&A testers test it and go, hey, this one house, you don't want to go in there. It's pretty, actually, you're going to get sued if this house is in the game and we need to adjust something. And then the devs are still going to do all that work and go check it, Yeah, so it seems like you are skeptical of NVIDIA's vision that they showed off of, the current vision of DLSS 5.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know. I just doesn't. It's like, can I play some of the old LucasArts games with this same kind of like will it? No.
Okay,
no, it's gonna be bad.
All right. Well, I think I've taken up more of your time than I intended, but that always seems to happen as we always go down quite a few rabbit holes. But I really did enjoy this AI conversation quite a bit, so I'm glad you gave me that time to really.
No, thank you for having me.
Well, yeah. Well, please tell people where to find you and plug whatever you want.
I don't know. Just Google Level1Techs or forum.level1techs.com, or there's a YouTube channel and Tech Linux. I don't know. Just you can like
they talk about
you can Google Wendell Linux and find me probably.
Well, I will link to it below for anyone who wants to find you, and then everybody, subscribe, leave a comment down below. I guess there's hype points now on mobile. Make sure that you ring the bell button and share. Please share this and join us on Patreon to ask people like Wendell questions. And otherwise,
don't forget the vitriolic comments.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. I'm sure no one will disagree with anything we said about AI or anything here. But we appreciate when you disagree, because whether you like it or not, your all caps comments help the video do better. So please comment down below either way. And yeah, that's it. I'll start rambling if I keep going. Thanks for watching and listening, everybody, and have a good week. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carmen Cry and Carrie Nosugad as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the about/support page in the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie Nosugada as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong, we love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guest questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit, and give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels:
Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Nicholas Buckner, Teak, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, MJB1, Daniel Hyde, GZ Ziggy, SNES Chalmers, Jim Ferrier, Velcom Alev, Jensen Wang, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Compressor iBox, Halbuma, Shredbird, Semi Molas, Krasin Thenos, Jonathan, Tommy, Jake Dude 23, Jake Martin, Zlicky, Gamers Unite, Win Wang, Ian Clifford, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Matthew Castells, Travis Gooding, Zoot Taylor, Mads, Greg, Michael McGee, Stephen Coates, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Aisha, James Anderson, Mark Raidmaker, Salty Internet Pirate, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Cameron, Michelle Pell, Huxapuma, Dan M1988, Teak Autumn, Reginald Ari, Little Germany, Windstar, James I. Raider, Shay, Milton, Brett Jones, Chuck Zinn, Stephen Dick, Mac Daffy, Render, Justin Bussell, Austin Haggerty, Joe Foot, Brian Wright, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Slushpa, Jansen Angima, The Forbidden Juice, RB Racer, Bing Bong 3, John Swin, Solarized 80, Elbergun, Keekum, Sprutnik, Brian P, Cornster 671, Penta, Winter Smash, Axley, Omega Doge, Huger Ander Kiwi, John Wick Boomstick, Mr. Tiger, Penguins Love AI, Porcelain Oats, Karim El Masri, Ryhills Cheap Bowls, Dominic Passeri, Manolis Ragkusis, AI Soldier 789, Kevin Coots, Jonathan Harris, Bespoke EP, Fred Burger, Kainush, Kagani, Johnny Trans, Sabir Ahmed, Arkeo, RK0, Dudester, John, Tiberius, Mirika, OMG Clover, Michael Gerner, Andreessen, and of course, thank you to Sahara for the music.